lived happily ever after.
WandaVision! Oh, this is gonna be a gas!
All right, well, it's been a goddamn minute, but Brandi and I are back again for a Horror Inside podcast, and this is very special. It's a little different, but it for sure still fits because it's something that I'm passionate about, and Brandi has, out of the blue, become also passionate about it over the past couple of days, and we'll talk about that once we get to it. But today, we are talking about WandaVision and, well, some of the Marvel stuff that we watched getting up to it, but the focus of this is WandaVision. So for the longest time, I mean, people who listen to this and also follow me on Twitter can regularly see that my Twitter is very much Resident Evil and other things, but the Scarlet Witch, Elizabeth Olsen from the MCU, is very much a big component of that, and like one of my biggest fucking loves for a very variety of reasons why I've just grown such attached to her character. And for the longest time, it was always, Brandi and I going back and forth showing each other things, and we did that with movies, and we've reviewed some of those. And for a long time, it was like, oh, Brandi, Marvel, it's so good, and you should watch it, you should get into it, specifically the MCU. And I wasn't the only person telling her that. Like, her sister was very much on that train, and she watched a big chunk of the MCU, and then kind of fell off for one reason or another. Not that she wasn't invested, but you can speak to that too. It just took some getting back into. She always knew who Scarlet Witch was, even before she got to her movies.
Well, mainly because of you, obviously.
Mainly because of me. You can quickly talk about like how you at first got into the movies and then how we got back into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I have to say, which people might hate me for, and that's fine. Like, I was just, and I'll just be honest, because it was just how I felt, that I was just not interested in Marvel at all, because I'm going to defend myself for a second. I just thought that they were like every other, like, I don't even know I've never even seen a superhero movie, so I don't really know what I was thinking. I was just thinking, oh, these are what's popular. I'm very cynical, and I usually watch movies that are fucking ancient instead of anything from today. So I was just like, oh, this is, like, it's going to be Hollywood explosions and CG and bullshit. Like, it was just a very cynical, bad way of
Right. I think you also have said it before. Like, you expected the Marvel movies, the MCU, to be very surface and not, so character-driven, which once you started watching it, you really did see that. And then, especially... now, so I guess if we want to go to now, so Brandi watched up until she watched all of them in order with her sister, and I jumped in from time to time, and the last one I watched with you was Wanda's first appearance, which was Age of Ultron.
Oh, yeah.
That was a handful of months ago. And then recently... as we're nerds, and you can see on our each respective channels that we do edit videos and music videos and things like that, and we're very particular and very OCD about how we edit and why we edit and what we want to edit. And so I recently started editing a Wanda video. I've made a few, but I started editing a Wanda video with a cover, I guess I think the official genre is like post-hardcore. That's the kind of music that I like. And it was a cover of a Lana Del Rey song, which Brandi can speak to a little bit as well. But it was by a band called the Amity Affliction, and it was her song Born to Die. And once I was editing, I was like, oh, these lyrics, they actually work so well. The song's real fast-paced, at least the cover. And I like editing things like that because that's the kind of music that I like. So that was kind of how we got back into it. And I was literally like, okay, Brandi, you made it so far into the MCU. Like, you really only have a handful left. But I was like, oh, I really want, especially, again, the hype in me got high after I started editing that video. And I was like, okay, this is really all you have to watch. And luckily, to lead up to WandaVision. Now, a lot of people would say that was, the wrong way to do it because there's other things in between. My argument was, you made it up to the next movie in your line was Civil War, which was her next appearance. And then we watched Infinity War, and then we watched Endgame, and then we watched WandaVision. And those are the most important story moments happen in those movies. So even if we weren't, I guess, technically watching them for those reasons, I know you enjoyed them, and we can talk a little bit about those at the end.
for the sake of being able to watch WandaVision with you and get the whole story of her and Vision, which, whew, we'll get into Vision. Anyway, so I glad that we did it that way because I feel like it, and you said something early on, you were like, Brandi, I'm sure if you watch WandaVision with me, like if you watch the 3 movies you're supposed to watch and then watch you were like, it may actually just help you get back into the world of and the headspace of Marvel.
And you'll
I was
want
like,
to step back and like I said, you'll be introduced to Black Panther, which you were.
Yeah, and I liked him. Yeah.
You might feel like in the future to go back to his movie or just whoever.
Yeah. I enjoyed everything that Brittany's my sister, by the way. I enjoyed everything she had shown me and the movies you jumped on and watched with us. Like everything, I was very invested. I remember every time I watched like an Avengers movie or even the first Avengers I saw, I was like, this is so cool, all of them together and fight. Like I loved the character stuff. I loved the writing. Obviously, it's like remarkable, amazing, whatever everybody knows it has amazing writing. I of course didn't expect that at first, but I loved it. I was super sucked in. I did it, and I'm glad. And it's so funny. And I have to say, because you kind of talked about the Born to Die video. I don't know, people probably won't understand that unless I say how truly obsessed and in love and just everything I am with Lana Del Rey. I'm the type of person that likes like really dramatic, like or sometimes even tragic love stories. It's just this weird thing that I find in entertainment is entertaining. Like whether it's a song about that or a movie or a book, just I love tragic love. I'm horrible, but it fascinates me to have all these people in love and then there's like drama and stuff around it. So I remember you kind of saying that you're like, well, maybe not to the degree that like. Because usually what I'm speaking is like, oh, the couple themselves have drama amongst themselves, like angst and drama and whatever. But I remember you saying, well, Wanda and Vision might have something in their story that makes it sort of tragic or whatever. And I obviously had no idea what you were talking about. Now I do, and it's so sad.
They just have such a soft, sweet relationship, but it's everything going on. They do. It's everything going on around them.
That's tragic.
Usually is world ending, and they're put in the middle of it. She has to kill him. And then Thanos turns back time and kills him again.
Awful.
And like they say, like Darcy says in WandaVision, and she had to watch. So it's just so tragic. And then like Civil War, you kind of see the beginnings. They kind of grow a little more connected, but they're on opposite sides, so they are fighting. Oh, it's just so good. And then Endgame, just the quick beats of the movies. And then Endgame, Vision is not a part of, but her big scene where she comes back at the end and she drops to the ground, stops Thanos in his track. It's like, you took everything from me. And then she literally, if he hadn't have cheated, fired down on the battlefield, she would have killed him. And there was nothing going to stop her from doing that, all because he took Vision away from her.
I know, it's so sad and tragic.
And then we got to WandaVision, and one of the things I might want to start with, because I feel like, again, this is how people, when WandaVision first was coming out, and again, I told you, like, week to week, there was all fucking theorizing everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube, it was a huge fucking thing. But that was one of the things that, again, the confusion, because WandaVision is intentionally confusing.
Yeah.
But right at the get-go, and you kept saying that before we got to it, like, oh, I know it has to do with sitcoms, but you didn't understand why or how that worked with the MCU at all.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to just talk a little bit about how that worked and how they executed it, and like how.
Well, then I should first start by saying that was one thing that made me want to watch WandaVision initially, even way before the Born to Die stuff happened, before you and I were even talking. I was just like, oh, because I remember when you were watching it week to week when it was coming out, and of course you weren't telling me in detail anything, but you were just like, oh, it's so good, Brandi. I feel like it's definitely something up your alley that you would like. And I saw not any spoilery stuff, but like things of it on, because it was so big, of course, when it came out.
Yeah.
On Twitter and shit, I would see I saw like the black and white, not a still, like a GIF of like Wanda and Vision in a black and white, and it looked like reminiscent to Dick Van Dyke or I Love Lucy, and that's shit that I personally really, really like. Like I just already said like a couple minutes ago that I am a nerd and I'm like an old soul and I love anything that's ancient to me. So I grew up on shows like I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke Show and all that stuff. So that was the first thing where I was like, huh. Why does she look super 50s? Like, why is it black and white?
You kind of are an old soul, because literally WandaVision became such a bigger thing, even bigger than Marvel, because when the show was airing and they were talking about it, like Elizabeth Olsen was interviewed, Paul Bettany was interviewed, people involved in the show, and they always talked about like, wow, this like became such a bigger thing because it was more than just Marvel fans. Like they said they heard people talk about like their parents or their grandparents interested in WandaVision because of sitcom stuff, and they were like, "Ooh, what's this?"
Even if I had not watched anything up to that point with Brittany, even if I wasn't friends with you, which no, that'd be so sad. But if I wasn't friends with you and I didn't know any, I feel like it's still something I would have been like, oh, I should check this out. Although I probably would have went into it completely blind, not even given the movies a chance, and I probably would have been so confused. So I'm glad I didn't do it that way. But I really was intrigued from all the little things I would see of it on like Twitter. And again, no, I didn't see any spoilers. I had no idea going into it how it could possibly tie into that. I was like, this is going to be confusing, isn't it? But it's very interesting. So I, off the bat, liked it. And I loved the way that Elizabeth, just real quick, I have to say, because she's already so beautiful anyway, but like her look in like the 50s and 60s episode, like that is like the thing, like that's my freaking like aesthetic. Like I love that type of look. And I even had like, I think I told you this before, but for my 21st birthday, I had a 50s party and I dressed very similar to how she dresses it, like with the dress. And she just looks, it's just so awesome. And it looks so authentic in the way that they shot it, which I'm sure we'll talk about with each, decade they're referencing. They shot it exactly to kind of match, which is so awesome. So I was already super like, ooh, I want to watch this. And then of course all this happened and I was like, I definitely need to watch this.
With you and I, and it's a dialogue and a language in our friendship that we can, like, early on, I would say things like, oh, Brandi, she's my Billy Cohen, and you knew exactly what that meant.
Yes.
And then that has since evolved backwards to me, where you're like, oh, actually, Brandi, I can relate to that, because, like, if you're comparing somebody, a character that you love so much, you can actually more relate to, like, oh, she's my, Scarlett O'Hara.
Scarlett O'Hara, which is so funny, Scarlett.
Yeah. I know. But I guess for context, because I feel like people that know me, whether it's on the internet or in real life, know how much I love Wanda. And I love the whole thing, but I'm so keenly laser focused on Wanda. There's very multifaceted reasons for that, to the point where, like I've told you, even like, in big action sequences, I literally would like Endgame, where everyone's there. I literally, even in the theater for the first time, I would like pinpoint. I'd see her little red thing go across the screen. She's a tiny dot in the background, but I'd seek her out. And hilariously, we give a shout out to him because he's awesome, and we mention him from time to time. Josh, the medic from Twitter. When Endgame and WandaVision was coming out, probably more Endgame, because we talked when that came out as well. I remember saying that to him, and he was like, because he also loves Wanda. I remember saying that to him, and he was also like, I thought I was the only one who did that. Like, look for her in the background of the huge fucking scenes.
Oh, I love that. I know he really loves her too, so that's awesome. So she definitely obviously has a fan base, and probably even more now because WandaVision blew, so that's awesome.
But like, just to quickly, I've said this to you, but just to explain it so people don't think I'm just, obsessed with her for no reason. There's multiple reasons. I said to you, I always knew, like, beyond Marvel, specifically X-Men is my baby. I love the X-Men comics, animated series, some of the movies. I just love those characters. They're like what I grew up with. I love them. And Scarlet Witch was always X-Men adjacent, and she was often involved in the X-Men sometimes because in the comics she's a mutant and she's Magneto's daughter, so she was often involved in those storylines. Side note, if they don't retcon her to be Magneto's daughter when he joins the MCU, I'm gonna be pissed. But so that's one reason, because she was adjacent to these characters that I already love so much, and she was herself a mutant. But it wasn't until, so there's one reason, but then when Elizabeth Olsen portrayed her in live action, there was something that she did, there was something about it that just really grabbed me. So there's the mutants, there's Elizabeth Olsen, there's like eventually her really deep storyline with mental health and things like that, and her grief, that was really strong and resonant to me. And then also in some way, in some movies, and this also stems from the comics as well, she's involved with the magic and the darker corners of the Marvel comics, with like, Marvel has a devil named Mephisto, and he's a big part of her storyline. So there's even that, and in WandaVision there's also moments like that, and then in the way she's directed in certain scenes, and like in particular Ultron, that are very horror movie leaning, which I love horror movies. So those are just some of the reasons why I'm very attached to the character.
Stands out too.
So many reasons. That aside, if you want to jump into WandaVision, we were on the sitcoms. Talk about more about those.
Oh, well, we should talk about too, because shout out, because another reason I was so intrigued, just such a little part of it, but so Dylan and I, he was talking earlier about how we were showing each other things. We've always done that, whether it's movies. We did branch out into shows when COVID hit, and we were able to explore different sitcoms that we both love. Speaking of sitcoms, haha. So I showed him The Office at first. He showed me Parks and Rec. We did a lot of different ones, and then we actually just finished, like 2 weeks ago now, maybe, I don't know. Wow, we did the Marvel stuff really fast then, if it was like 2 weeks ago. Anyway,
Yeah.
So Dylan and I showed each other we paired them up, and it fit really perfectly, our all-time favorite sitcoms, whereas he was showing me Friends. I've never seen it. Can't believe after all these years I have never seen it, and I didn't know any spoilers. And then I showed him that 70s show, which he had seen and knew certain things, but it was fun to go through every single episode. I grew up with that 70s show. He grew up with Friends. It's just like one of those things that we both really were passionate about, wanted to show each other, and it was so fun. So we had just gotten done that 70s show, and of course, I'm mentioning that because Deborah Jo Rupp is a big part of that 70s show. She plays Kitty Foreman. She's fucking awesome and hilarious, and she also is, of course, part of WandaVision, which is WandaVision.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I know. I told you in particular, which is still something I would love to watch with you, that Elizabeth Olsen, in the making of, they talk about Deborah Jo Rupp for a couple minutes, and Elizabeth Olsen literally calls her and she's like, oh, we have Deborah Jo, and she's like, I can't remember if she says sitcom royalty or sitcom gold.
Yeah, that's just awesome, because it's like she has to obviously be referring to that 70s show, because that's like the biggest thing that Deborah Jo Rupp is known for. I know she was on Friends for a couple episodes too.
Friends,
which actually,
but that's very minor compared to that 70s show.
Love her as Kitty Foreman, so it was so awesome to see her, especially because the show of WandaVision is paying homage to sitcoms, to have her on there in some small way. I'm like, oh, this is an homage to that 70s show. That's how I feel.
Well, I guess going off of that too, I did kind of want to talk a little bit about the sitcoms as they go along, and then we could interject the story points and the character points that come along. And then
it's going to be a long talk because I'm sad.
We talked about this a little bit, and it's definitely something that the creator and the writer talked about. And this is not going to be a deep dive into that on this podcast. There's people on YouTube who could do this better, but I think it's interesting to bring up when I can remember what it represents. They said that the show was modeled after the 5 stages of grief. And that first episode, I remember specifically them talking about it being denial, because she literally, I thought when the show was gonna, when I watched the first episode, I thought there was going to be some explanation as to how she got there. I thought it would have picked up after Endgame. We see some of those answers later. But no, it literally just, she's in the sitcom with Vision, and there's no explanation as to what's happening or why they're there. And I love that being denial, because she's literally denying the outside reality. There's no Avengers. There's no, even later in the episode when some of the Twilight Zone hitches come in.
The creepy stuff, yeah.
Even that, they're being asked, by Vision's boss and Mrs. Hart, who's played by Deborah Jo Rupp, they're being asked, where'd you come from? How long have you been here? When are you going to have children? And how long have you been married? And they cannot remember anything. Yeah. They just can't remember. And you find out reasons why they can't remember. They both have different reasons. But the first episode is very much amongst the sitcom-y 50s tropes, and the first episode is definitely the Dick Van Dyke Show, and you can tell the kitchen set is very Dick Van Dyke. Their living room is Dick Van Dyke.
I love that.
But even the first episode just being a complete denial of her prior reality is very interesting.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And when you had said something about the 5 stages of grief, I was just like, oh shit. Well, you didn't say that early on. You didn't spoil anything or whatever. But
no,
I remember
I didn't.
I remember you kind of sort of mentioning that as we were already getting towards the end and things were getting revealed and kind of unraveling, and I was just like, oh, I'm so sad, because she has such a tragic story anyway, which we can get into in general. So
well, now that we're actually talking about it more in depth, I have general notes, but I knew that things would come to me as we go, and I'd love to explain them more to you in detail, that makes things even creepier. So the first Twilight Zone moment that happened at the end of that episode was when they were being grilled about their past and where they came from.
Oh yeah, and that weird
thing. And then Wanda's boss, he started to choke. And then that's when the camera changed, and it's zooming in on them, and it's not a sitcom lens anymore. It's a really creepy, he's choking, and Mrs. Hart, Deborah Jo Rupp,
keeps repeating,
saying, stop it, stop it,
that's
stop
creepy.
it.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, she starts doing it very creepily, but then at a certain point she does, and this is, you understand this more once you've seen the series once and looked into it a little bit more, or even watched it a couple times. She, at a certain point, just is looking directly at Wanda, and she's saying it very creepily at first, like, stop it, and there's even like a weird pitch to her voice at some point, but then she like even starts to get a little teary-eyed, and she's like, stop it, and she's saying, and but knowing how the series ends, Wanda being like keeping these people hostage, and you know, in her reality, which she did not know at this point that's what she was doing,
right?
Because she said in the series, like, I don't remember how this happened, and you find out later how it happened, but I love that's just thinking about it back, knowing the end result, knowing that was some creepy, like, you know, Mrs. Hart inside is like, stop it, let us go, you stop it. Like,
it gives me chills when you said that, because I didn't even think of it.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that scene since we watched it. I mean, we literally just finished it, so I didn't think, now connecting it with now, since I know how it ends, that's so true, that's just so creepy that she was like, sort of breaking out of character, but not really, because then right afterwards, remember, she just starts laughing again, like, then everything's fine, so it's like, she like basically was, trying to break out of it, but and Wanda looked really confused. Obviously, she really had no idea. So, that is creepy to think of.
Well, there's also another creepy moment in that scene, which the whole stop it. I've heard that's what's happening, but like, I always thought this was Vision's literally sitting there, like, and not doing anything. They're not.
Yeah.
Wanda's like a little distraught that this guy's choking and falling on the ground and stuff. But Vision's just sitting there, looking all confused, looking at Wanda, not sure what to do, and he doesn't move at all until she's like, "Vision, help him!" And then he just blinks his eyes, stands up, and just phases the thing out of his throat. And knowing now that where Vision came from, that she didn't steal his corpse, and she literally created him. I always thought that would have been the very early moments of when she created the reality, that like she had that early control over Vision. Like, he didn't know what to do until she gave him permission to do it.
Oh, that's interesting. I never even thought about it. Yeah, because I now thinking back on it, there's really, like, I wonder why he was just sitting there, because Vision, as we know, is like so heroic, and he always tries to help people, so you would think normal Vision, that situation would have been like,
it was such a great, like, little moment of Paul Bettany's performance that makes me think that's what's happening when she says, "Vision, help him." And in his performance, like I said, he literally just goes from looking all confused and not sure what to do. He literally blinks and stands up like he's in a, you know, and immediately does that.
Yeah.
And it's just in his performance that, like, she flipped a switch and told him what he had to do.
That's interesting. I didn't really think about it like that, but it's, now that I'm thinking back on that first episode, and that was the first, because that was the first weird / creepy moment.
Yeah, because like throughout the series, he slowly becomes more aware of like what's happening and why things are so weird. But I imagine that would have been right at the beginning, where he didn't know what to do without her permission.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And makes it even more, I don't know, for some reason, just like eerie, even though, which we'll get into, Wanda's obviously like not a villain, and if she wasn't aware of what she was really doing. I mean, I guess people could say she's like an anti-hero or whatever, which I actually really like that term, and always liked characters that are portrayed like that. But she wasn't like aware at that time, so it's like, it is really like, it's like when that first, I remember in my head, like when that first started happening, I'm like, of course anybody would be like, I was like, what is going on? And then, but Deborah drove up because the way that she kept saying it over, and like, but it was like, it was so eerie the way that, because I can hear it in my head how she was saying it, and it's like, like the whole situation was so weird and creepy, and like you said, Twilight Zone, which is probably what they were going for with some of the creepy moments, which is so awesome. But I didn't even think about that Vision part. As you brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, why was he just sitting there? And then as you explained it, that makes total sense. It's like, wow, he had no...
He was so brand new.
Yeah.
She had just created him, like, and she has control over everything else in that reality.
Yeah.
That until he, like, really started to figure things out and kind of break down, that he probably didn't know what to do. Oh, but I love that episode. You know, not a whole lot happens in that besides setting it up, and then, you know, that creepy moment at the end.
Yeah.
I've said before that as far as, like, an episode that has my favorite Twilight Zone-y shifts, it's definitely episode 2, for whatever reason. And episode 2, you can tell as the episodes go along and the decades shift and change, when their house will change.
Oh yeah.
very subtly as it goes through, and then in the second episode, it's very much. And I told this to you when we were watching that my mom loved Bewitched and always watched it when I was growing up, so I could
Oh, yeah.
recognize the set and the kitchen and the
Mhm.
little open like window or whatever between the kitchen and the living room, and the door to their house in that episode is the Bewitched door with the window above the
That's
top.
cool.
So it was very much that, but like, yeah, as far as like the Twilight Zone moments in that episode, one of the first that's just like, oh, what the fuck, is, well, in the beginning they were in bed and they kept
Oh, they
hearing
kept hearing.
noises outside the
Yeah.
window, and there was some funny moments with that too, with like Vision
Yeah.
getting scared and jumping into bed, and then Wanda like combining their beds because that was
Oh,
such
yeah.
a sitcom thing. They were separate.
I know.
But like when she found that mini sword drone and it was the only thing in color in her bush. And we
Oh,
find
yeah.
out later that literally the world was in black and white, so she was literally seeing that in color and being like, what the fuck?
I know, that's really cool.
I mean, there's not a whole lot of like character stuff to talk about in the first couple episodes because it is just setting up the
Yeah,
sitcom.
it's cool
There's
'cause the
subtle
sitcom stuff-
moments as well too. I loved, but probably my favorite Twilight Zone twist, or yeah, in that episode was the radio.
Yes, that was
And at first you don't know who's talking to her, but somebody starts talking to her through the radio, like Wanda, who's doing this to you, because they didn't know she was
Yeah.
responsible for creating the hex, as Darcy called it, which I'll give you some, as we're talking about this, I can fill you in on a little of the nerdy comic book things that the hex is not just Darcy was like, oh yeah, that's what I've been calling it because of its hexagonal shape. That's what she
Oh,
said.
yeah.
Wanda in the comics has, they all often refer to it as hex powers. But no, and somebody's talking to her through the radio. That's fucking creepy. And that
I know,
was like
it's
right
just the way
as
it sounds, and it's all distorted, and you're still confused at that point. So you're like, who the fuck, like, is like, who's talking to her? And that part got to me too. It was like very subtle but eerie, and that was probably my favorite of the quote unquote
Yeah.
Twilight creepy moments too.
Mhm. Yeah, and it came right before or right after Dottie. Early on, they make Dottie seem like she's more important a character, and then they literally said later, or they thought, like thinking, oh, there's going to be some big reveal with Dottie, and they literally said afterwards, oh, she was just a red herring to confuse people.
Ha! That's funny.
But like she, even before that happened, she was like, I've heard things about you and your husband, and Wanda's like, I don't know what you've heard, but we don't mean you any harm. And she's like, I don't believe you. And then she starts hearing on the radio, it's freaking them both out.
These are like little subtle things I'm hoping I will pick up on like the second time around watching, because of course the first time you're just like hyper focused
Very
on like
confused.
what's going on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I did think it was super eerie when the static came through and it was just like, Wanda, who's doing like that freaked me out. Like there's definitely a lot of moments that like gave me like goose, like I'm like, ooh, what's going on? Like, and I love the Twilight Zone. I grew up with that show too, so like having those references, I was like, ooh, this is really dope. Like I think the whole, which I know we have so much more to talk about, but I just have to say, like, I really think the whole concept with the sitcoms is so fucking creative, unique, just original. It's so cool. And I think, like, because I've been nerding out too, which we'll talk later, but I've been watching things now on my own, like when you and I aren't talking, like, different Wanda and Vision videos, which we'll get into, I'm sure. And just things of the cast and stuff, like you and I watched a couple things together, but last night I watched something where, like, I guess, like, Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen were both, like, when they first got the scripts, or when they first were told of the concept, they were like, well, that's cool, but like, who's gonna like, are people gonna they said people would either really love it and embrace it, which is more of what happened, and then, or some people would just absolutely, or people would just hate it, and I'm like, because it was just so different, and I'm like, oh man, I like that though, because it's not just, which I'm sure we'll talk even more about, like, which the Marvel movies are all unique in themselves anyway. They always have way more to them than just, oh, this is a superhero movie with this plot and a villain and, a guy wearing a cape. It's not anything like that, but I feel like the structure of WandaVision is even more unique and I don't know, different than those, and more character, because it's so, like I don't know. It's so good. The sitcom stuff is so amazing, and to be thrown into it without, that's why when you were saying earlier, like, you are just kind of thrown into it in that first episode, you don't see Wanda getting to that point. You're just there, and I like that they don't explain it till later. Yeah, and I know some people were like, oh, I guess because you and I've talked about this, that like maybe our generation is just so, or this generation is just so spoiled by being able to binge things nowadays on any streaming platform, that having to wait, like, people apparently were like,
there was
pissed,
some people
like, who
couldn't sit with the mystery of it week to week, but I fucking loved that.
Yeah.
If Disney Plus was a streaming platform that did put their shows out for binging, and WandaVision was a binge show, I would have I know me. I would have binged it in one night, whether my friend who I watched it with could do it all with me at once or not. I would have just been done, and then I would have been sad that it was over so fast.
That was
I loved
over.
being able to sit in it as much as I did, as much as it occupied so much of my headspace
Yeah.
for 8 or 9 weeks. Like, that was amazing to me. I loved, even if they started to reveal things in episode 4, that there
Yeah.
was still so many mysteries and still so many answers, and every episode added something else to it, like her
Yeah,
fake
yeah.
brother. And
No, that's why I don't feel like at all. I know that I've heard some criticisms too, which I know everything that I've watched or I've seen, and even shit I saw on Twitter before you and I even watched it. It was so popular and well received, which I like because it's so unique that I'm glad that the fan base as a whole, pretty much everybody in
Yeah.
consensus that it was a good and unique and everybody liked it. So that's awesome. But I know there was some criticism too, like, oh, they revealed things too early, which I didn't feel like that at all. I was still waiting at the end of each episode, like, when am I going to find out fully what's going on? In a good way, though, not in a way where, again, I was like, I need to know what's happening. It was just like on the edge of my seat, kind of like, ooh. So I don't feel like anything was revealed too, quote unquote, too soon, because at the end of each episode, like you said, they added, and there was more like, well, I still don't know what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
because I don't even think they revealed that how Wanda really created it. So
until the end of the second to last episode.
yeah, so like it was still very like, oh, what's the fuck's going on here? And what is the
Mhm.
sitcom thing? You didn't know that till the very end because of like
Yeah.
obviously her childhood and stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk
Mhm.
more about the
Yes.
story as we go on. But like it was so cool. It was so unique.
Well, I love, I have these in my notes too as like a separate thing, but I think it's more appropriate to talk about them as we go through the episodes. But like, I love being able to explain to you what some of the Easter eggs and things meant, or what they were actually, because I have those commercials that like interrupted each episode, which were
Oh,
very
that's
cool
cool,
and
yeah.
very era specific. But
Mhm.
each commercial had some kind of little reference to her past in the movies and her backstory in the movies. And oh, interestingly, I think I heard when they said that Doctor Strange, they planned him to have a cameo at the end, and then they took him out for some reason. Their original pitch was that all the commercials were Doctor Strange trying to get through to Wanda, get
Oh,
through
that
her
would have been
reality,
cool.
and like trying, yeah, get to her, like communicate with her.
I
That was the
read.
original pitch.
I guess it all can be based on theory. Certain things can, because I read that the commercials are representation, not again of the straight up like 5 stages of grief, but like showing how Wanda starts to spiral. Like that's why like the last commercial is like all about like depression and taking this antidepressant,
I mean,
depressant. But even they said even earlier ones, like if you watch them, they slowly start to get more and more like messy, and it's supposed to represent her mind or whatever at that point. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that very first one, Marvel fans picked up on it right away, but like the whole, it was the toaster, the Stark
Yeah.
toaster, and the whole thing's in black and white, except there was a blinking red light on the toaster, and it kept blinking faster and faster as the toast was cooking or whatever, and they say it was a Stark toaster, and the light was red, and it kept blinking faster and faster and sounded like a bomb, and that was symbolized the Stark bomb that killed her parents.
Oh, that makes sense. That's interesting. See,
Yeah.
certain things again, I'm probably gonna pick up on more when I watch it again. But I don't think I noticed that. Because I don't remember. But
Yeah.
I just thought the commercials were just fun and to pay again homage to the era and the sitcom that they were representing. But it is cool to know that like they actually had a meaning as well.
A meaning, yeah. I mean, there's some that I can explain more than others, but sometimes some of it's very, very, very cool and interesting as far as connections to Wanda and even some of her comic book stuff that hasn't been introduced yet. So that's really
that is cool.
Episode 2, I think,
Oh, that was
standout
the funny one though
comedic
too,
moment
right?
to me, when Vision
Yeah.
swallowed the gum and it was
Yes.
like, quote, drunk.
Oh,
I
that
told
was
you
one of my favorite moments.
there's so many lines in that, and he's trying to, like, they're doing a magic act, and he's
Yeah.
like, keeps fucking it up because they're trying to hide their abilities, but he's just, like, showing it, and then
Just
Wanda
showing-
has to, like, trick it and make it be
Yeah.
like, oh, you weren't supposed to see that, or whatever she says. But
he
there
was
was
so
one
funny.
line. There was one of the first lines. He comes on the backstage and ups to her, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I said this to you. It's just it's coming from Drunk Vision, but it's such just a cute little pet name, and he says it so like adorably to her, and he's like, "Oh, Wanda, my little cabbage."
That is so cute and funny. I love seeing him quote unquote get drunk because of the piece of gum or whatever getting stuck and just making him act all. Oh my god, that was so funny. I didn't expect to see Vision drunk. Like that's
I know,
just great.
but that's such a sitcom thing where there's usually
Yeah.
episodes where characters do get drunk, so it's funny they did it that way for Vision. Like the gum literally is gunking up his like gears.
Oh my god, yeah. It just reminds me I don't know if it was like, I don't know if it was paying homage to a specific like
Yeah.
Witch or Dick Van Dyke episode, but I know that like there's that hilarious famous
Yeah.
episode of I Love Lucy where she gets all drunk doing a commercial, and it's so
Yeah.
funny. So, and it's like the antics and the time period that episode takes place. It's like that's such a sitcom thing of that era of just like having to do something, but somebody is messing it up because they're either drunk or they're just being stupid. Like it's just that type of silly but it works so well. And it was so funny. Oh my god, that was the highlight of Paul Bettany.
That episode. Yeah, he's so funny on that episode. And like, there's so many lines from that little moment too, but there's just one other one that I want to mention because I just think every line is just so great. And it came from Agnes, who was in the audience, and we'll talk about her later and who she actually is. But like, it was when they were doing the magic thing, and like Wanda was supposed to get into the box and then disappear, but he fucked it up, and like before she even got in, he started to do the trick. Yeah. And Agnes is in the audience, and she's like, "Are you sure?" Because she's supposed to disappear. Agnes was like, "Are you sure you don't need an audience volunteer named my husband Ralph, like to get him to disappear?" Because like the first half of the series, she just keeps mentioning Ralph.
Ralph, yeah.
An invisible character, which is again a sitcom trope, but like, I love how she says that, and Paul Bettany's like, he's like, no.
Why does he say it like that? Like he's like nervous or something. Yeah. Oh man, he's so good in that. I remember just like, man, if if the show was a little bit longer, I know like they
it's like too when he was like she's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I just came from the boys and we played a game of horse's shoes.
Oh yeah,
horse's shoes. He couldn't get it out right, and then like a minute later, there's like a person in a horse costume that walks past them. He was like, I was just playing with his shoes.
Yeah, I was dying. I was gonna say, like, if the show had just been a little bit longer, we may have gotten more sitcom-y hilarity moments like that. But even the ones we got were like gold. That was so funny. I was dying. Like, whoever wrote that to make like, oh, let's make Vision get like gum stuck in him so he gets like kind of drunk. Like that is genius. I told you in anything when I love a character or I love a show, I love when any of the characters get drunk because it's like their personality times 10. We talked about it with like Ross and Friends or even Phoebe, and then like there's episodes of that 70s show where like Eric or just Kitty, of course, or even Donna's hilarious when she gets drunk. Like I love seeing characters when they're all, I don't know why, it's just it's like a more outrageous version of the character, and like seeing him like that, like I did not expect that. I remember like, oh god, he's just swallowed the gum, like and I saw it go into like which was so cool too, like the little specific, they were so like good about like this is this time period. So because remember when they show like the gears inside of him, it like goes up and it looks kind of cartoony, and like they would do stuff like that in sitcoms back then. So that's like, I love that. And like I didn't expect it to make him react like that. I thought it was gonna shut him down or something. Like, oh god, is he gonna just like pat like, but I love that they literally were like, we're just gonna make him drunk as fuck. It's like so funny.
All right, and I guess just to wrap up on the 60s episode, the only other thing I really like to say about it is I love the Twilight Zone-y moment at the end where they hear the noise outside their house again, and then they go outside to inspect, and somebody's crawling out of the sewers. And for whatever reason, Wanda does not like that. Maybe it's, again, someone intruding on her reality. And she literally just says no, and then it seems like they're rewound and put back inside. Mm-hmm. And at first, that was such a moment that people were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I love that because that's like, I told you at one point we were watching it that this show, it's built for so many reasons, like, dealing with her grief and, literally, explaining her as the Scarlet Witch because she never had that name before and what does it mean and everything. But also it gave her most prominent comic book power that she's never displayed in the movies because of time, and it's such a nebulous and confusing power, but to rewrite and warp reality. So that first hitch right there where it looked like they were rewound back inside, I love that moment because even when it happened, I was like, shit, they're doing it. That's the first time she's actually, at least that we've seen, because we weren't explained to what happened and how they're there, but like that was the first time we saw her use her reality warping powers, and she just put them back inside and was like, fuck this, I don't know what's happening out here, but I don't like it. Right. It interrupted me in Vision.
And it just looked so creepy too, the image of it. Like we obviously end up finding out what it is later, but it's like it looks like some fucking like
VHS rewinding.
Yeah, like no, I'm talking about the dude that comes out too. Like he just stands up and he just looks over at her, and he looks like he's like wearing like a it looks
Beekeepers.
yeah, there's like all these bees around or whatever, and I was just like, that was definitely like my favorite creepy moment is definitely the radio. I agree with you on that. It was just so eerie and so subtle. But if there's a moment that reminds me the most of Twilight Zone, it was that, because I was like, what is, like, he just came out and he looked over at her or whatever, and she just said no, and then it just stopped. It was so weird and creepy and cool, and I know you obviously
And
find out later what it is, but it was creepy.
it's an answer that's never answered for like the rest of the series, but like some people have said like, what happened to that guy? What did she do to that guy? Did she just expel him? Maybe she did the same thing she did to Monica and she
That's
like
what I
pushed him out or
assumed.
something. Yeah, that would make sense.
Like, I don't think she straight up killed him or anything. I
No.
think he just like morphed out or went out of the reality, or yeah, her
Hex.
reality or whatever. The hex, yeah. That's
Yeah.
such a cool like way to say it too, though.
I know. I love the way that they made it work because again, that's a thing from the comics, but like Darcy just explains it as, oh, that's the shape of her bubble. She just
Yeah,
made
that's
it
cool.
into a hex and it has all the different sides. But then that episode ends, of course, with the whole episode. There was a weird thing with like for the children, and it was just such a creepy, culty
Oh yeah, that
people
was
in the town
creepy.
were saying.
Yeah.
And then at the end, just she warps them back inside, and then she's pregnant, just
Oh yeah.
magically, I suppose. And then that's how the episode ends, and it goes into color, and then we know we're going to the 70s. But
Yeah.
like her again, comic book stuff, which I'd love being able to explain to you now, because I didn't want to get into the weeds of it in the show and like take you out of it or confuse you or whatever. But like seeing her pregnant in that moment is such a big fucking deal, because she does have those kids, Billy and Tommy, in the comics.
Okay.
It's very convoluted to how it happens. Again, later they find out, oh, they're shards of the demon Mephisto, and then they're absorbed back. It's comic
Oh
book
yeah, I remember you saying that.
nonsense. But like her losing those kids in the comics is a huge reason, which happens, and they come back later as something else. But it's a huge why she has a mental breakdown in the comics, and she kills, inadvertently she kills a couple Avengers, and just she was made to forget that those kids ever existed, and then when she finds out that they were, she kind
Wow.
of loses it.
Which makes sense.
But her being pregnant in there was the first symbol of like, oh wow, they're actually going in this direction, like that Wanda's gonna go mad. But we'll see if that's how they go. We'll see how her role in Doctor Strange too. But she, as the show ends, she hears her children. So
Yeah.
yeah, which is creepy, like from another multiverse or something, wherever they went after they phased when the hex went away.
So it could be a nod that they're gonna paint her that way. I mean, she already. I mean, and totally understandably so. So this is not insulting when I say that, but they already do kind of paint her as even she's kind of crazy in WandaVision with her grief and everything that she's gone
Right.
through.
Well, they
Like
do that intentionally too,
Yeah.
which makes her, that makes her a very complex character, and I fucking love it. She's not one note. She's not,
Yeah.
super powerful, and she'll save the day. She has her own struggles and her own problems
Yeah,
that she has to
definitely.
deal with, some of which have to do with her power and not being able to like let go of people. But no, they do the same thing like with Hayward, who throughout the series is trying to paint her as a villain, even lying
Oh,
about her
that
stealing.
jackass, yeah.
I know. Even lying about her stealing Vision's corpse, which we find that out later that he lied about her taking the body.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
I know. But we can get more into this with like Monica, but I love her on the other side just legitimately wanted to help Wanda.
Oh, I know.
She
I know. She was a
understood her
great character.
grief. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, then Monica's in the next episode where it's the 70s and Wanda is getting like more and more pregnant as the episode goes on, which is just
Yeah.
crazy. And she has the twins, and there's the moment at the end of that which is the first real MCU crack into the foundation of her reality, when Monica mentions Ultron and that he had killed
Oh,
Pietro.
yeah. Yeah.
That's what causes Wanda to push her out of the reality, and then yeah. So I don't know if you wanted to go episode by episode, continue, but I mean, I think that's a fine structure, and it'll kind of remind us what to talk about.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Oh, I did want to say the one thing on her kids and like her being pregnant and all that
Oh,
is
yeah.
like, I do like how, and I feel like it had to have been intentional, but like, this is the Vision fangirl in me and the WandaVision as a couple thing, but like, I do really like how they have her in the 60s episode, put their bed together as
Heads
one.
together, yeah.
And then they kind of go under the cut, like they're making this like
Yeah,
quirky,
yeah.
cute joke that they're literally about to bone, which is so funny because in an actual 50s or 60s sitcom, that shit would have not flown at all. But I do like how they do
No.
that because it's almost like, did they have that intentionally? Like you know that they kind of are doing something frisky, and then she ends up pregnant. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can dig it.
Well, I told you that, like, literally they've been asked in interviews before, like, does Paul Bettany, does Vision, does he actually have a dick? Like,
Yeah.
how would that work? How would they do anything? I guess in the context of the show, she created Vision, and even Monica says later, you know, Wanda's twins are real. Everything she creates in there is real. So I guess she just kind of made them out of magic, but which is interesting. But yeah.
Hey, Vision has a dick. Stop trying to play.
Well, as I've told you before, when Paul Bettany has been asked that question, he's literally answered it and said, like, well, like in Ultron, they show he like sees Thor's cape and just creates the cape. So, but then Paul Bettany, yeah, he's literally said before, well, I mean, the man can change his density, and he's like, so that's a boon for any girl.
Oh, that's great. That's why I love him. That's hilarious. Oh.
But then I guess in episode 4, you know, we start to get more answers. Like they don't move forward in the sitcoms at that point. And I remember when it started, you were like, "Oh man, but I want to see the 80s."
Oh yeah, I remember that. Which it does though, right? Yeah, it goes to the 80s because it's like
after that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, after all that, yeah. I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought once we got our glimpse of the real world or whatever, and we were starting to unravel the mystery, I just thought they were gonna stop with the sitcom stuff because all I had ever seen of WandaVision up to that point, I told you I saw like little things on Twitter here and there, was like the 50s and 60s stuff because I saw the black and white. I think I mainly just saw the 50s when she has the real curly hair and I saw that. And then I remember seeing one little glimpse of her in this, and I knew immediately it was the 70s because her poker straight hair and what she was like wearing or whatever. So I just thought after that, I'm like, oh, I don't remember. But then I remembered, which again, I'm sure we will talk about once we get to that episode, some of the Office references that are later, which I was like, oh, and I know they're going to go back into it. But I was curious how, like, we're supposed to start finding out shit, but it's like, how are they going to work the sitcom? But they still did it, which was awesome. Like, it still went back into the sitcom world, too, which was cool.
No, I love that. But I love episode 4 giving you some answers. I think my favorite was finding out who Geraldine actually was. And I told you you weren't introduced to her because we did not watch Captain Marvel. But I told you she's the little girl in Captain Marvel. And then she grew up to be Monica Rambeau. Funny story, when we were watching it, I slipped up, and it's such a minor thing that I didn't want to spoil anything before it happened, but I slipped up and called Geraldine. I called her Monica before she was Monica.
Yeah.
And you were like, why Monica? And I just really slyly covered it up. And like, I was like, well, you just watched Friends. I was like, oh, I'm just thinking of Fat Monica.
Yeah.
I was, and you were probably so confused.
I just remember laughing at you. I was like, why'd you say Monica? It's not even close to her name. And you were just like, oh, yeah, that's how you said
and Fat Monica was my Skype like picture background at that point.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. But oh yeah, I covered my tracks pretty well.
Not that I would have known at all what you were talking about, but it was fun.
Yeah. But no, like the opening of that episode 4 is literally, it's one of my favorite MCU moments, like outside of the sitcom, because literally we see Monica come back. Tony snapped his fingers and died, sadly. Oh. And he brought everyone back, and that was in that moment. There's even really awesome videos on YouTube where people edit, like side by side, they have the blip, which is called from Endgame, where people are coming back side by side, with that scene from WandaVision side by side with this scene from Far From Home that's done a little more comedically, but when people are coming back, people have edited those literally side by side, so like the timing is perfect. But like, I loved that opening in WandaVision, just seeing the real world repercussions of, oh shit, these people they're coming back. Like the fact that it happens in the middle of a hospital. There's one line that I just thought was so fucking chilling, where of course she wakes up or comes back and doesn't realize it's been 5 years. She thinks it's been 5 minutes, and her mom has just taken off to more tests or whatever because her mom died of cancer in the 5 years, which is a real tragic way to find out. Like she's literally like, oh, I thought I was asleep for 10 minutes. No, I've been gone for 5 years, and my mom died in the meantime.
Yeah, that's crazy, and it's sad. And at first, I think I think just the first couple seconds I was slightly confused of what was going on, but then quickly, like, as the scene progressed or whatever, I was like, oh shit, like, this is the,
coming back.
and that's, remember my first theory too, I was thinking like, oh, our Wanda, is that where, because I thought maybe after what's his name, Thanos. See, everybody's gonna be like, you're not a real Marvel fan. I don't even know people. No, but once he got rid of everybody and everybody started to crumble and like certain people were chosen to stay and certain people, I was like, oh, this was my first just initial thought. Again, had no idea what was beyond in the show or whatever. But I was just like, oh, like, is Wanda seeing all this sitcom-y shit to be like happy with Vision, but she's actually just disintegrated. Like, I was like, oh, like, maybe
that's where they were sent or something.
Yeah, like maybe like quote unquote, not to sound cheesy, but like, oh, maybe that was like her afterlife or whatever, her idea of heaven, and that's like, because the MCU so it can be magical and spiritual. So I was like, oh, maybe that's just like what she's seeing as she's literally dead, which is so horrible. But I was just like, that's just what I thought, because once Monica got sent out of it, I was like, oh, that just was my first initial thought, which would have been kind of cool, but
yeah. But no, there was, when she like came back in that hospital, there was just one line in particular that I just loved, because it was such a chilling real world thing where they're in the hospital. Literally, people must be popping back in the hospital beds that are already filled with other people, like, because they come back where they dusted in the first place. And like, she bumps into a nurse or a doctor and asking for help, and he's like, I don't have time for this, like, they're all coming back, we don't have the capacity. So literally, like, the whole hospital is just being overrun because everyone was coming back that disappeared 5 years ago. I love seeing that in such a dramatic real world way,
chaotic way.
Again, the Marvel MCU, they can take comic booky moments like that, like people are snapped away, turned to dust, they're snapped back. And then in Endgame, you just see it as the heroics of everyone coming back through the portals. But I love seeing that in WandaVision, seeing that in such this is how the world experienced it. If you can only imagine how many other instances that were similar to that.
Yeah, that's really sad and fucked up. But it was, and I didn't know her character, but I immediately, I guess if you want to segue into kind of talking about her for a little bit, I immediately when she was, what was her name in the sitcom?
Geraldine.
Yeah, obviously at first I just thought, oh, well, I liked her because the first time I think we see her is when Wanda is at that gathering of
like a pool club or something.
Yeah, some type of club or whatever, which again, it reminded me, it was so very 60s to like all the ladies get together and gossip and act like assholes or whatever, I don't know. But I like how like she felt like she didn't fit in, and then Geraldine was like, oh, I like your pants, and like they were just both talking.
Oh, just side note, Agatha has a great line in that scene where she has like a flask and she like fills up the girl next to her's like drink, and then at the end she's just like, because she's over Dottie like being like the queen bee or whatever, and Agatha's just like, or Agnes at that point, she's like, how is anyone doing this sober?
Oh, and she's so great. Anyway, what's her name? Catherine Hahn. She's just, I always liked her anyway. I know we're definitely going to talk about her. She's great. I do remember that name. But
but go back to Monica.
Yeah, like at first I just thought, oh, like she's going to be somebody, I just thought within the sitcom world, again, had no idea where the show was going. Oh, this is going to be somebody that Wanda bonds with, because while Agnes was her neighbor and immediately introduced herself as such, I was like, oh, they don't really like bond. They don't really fit. Like, it seems like Agnes is like, again, didn't know it was Agatha. At that time, my brain was just like, oh, Agnes seems like the annoying neighbor that's nosy and just wants to, and like, so I was like, oh, this is a friend for Wanda to have in this world. That's what I thought of Geraldine at first. But then when of course she got blasted out, and then it was Monica. Oh my God, what a great fucking character. I don't even know where to start with her. She's just, first of all, her story is tragic, as well as you were just saying. It's like sad and her mom and everything, but like also like her drive to want to help Wanda and not paint her as a villain, and sees her as just the tragic character that she is, and not like a villain. Like, I just love that. Like, she wants so badly to just get through
just
to her,
help her, and like, because again, she understands her grief, and like there's one line in particular before she makes her way back into the Hex near the end of the series, where she says she's going to go back in, and Darcy's like, you can't go back in. The Hex has literally rewritten your cells on a molecular level, and that's how she gets her powers later. And then Monica was just like, I'm still going in, and she was just like, I understand how Wanda's feeling, and I'm not going to stop until I help her. Like, she's I fucking love her character.
Oh, I know
She's that empathetic of a character.
I think I even said that's what I love about her. But I even think I said this in the 70s episode when Wanda starts to give birth. I again had no idea it was going to turn into Monica and she was going to have such a big part in figuring out the mystery. But I remembered like just a subtle moment where I was like, oh, she's such a good friend, and you were like, oh yeah, she. Of course, you knew at that point what was going to be. You were like, oh yeah, she really is, because like she literally like. Even in the sitcom world, as Geraldine was like helping Wanda like deliver the babies and trying to keep her calm and everything. So I don't know. She just off the bat was like just a really good, caring, empathetic character. And
well, it's in the next episode, but if we're on her right now, I love the scene where and we'll talk about this the moments with Wanda and this scene in particular, but the moments with Monica we can talk about in the next episode when Wanda just walks out of the hex after they target her with that drone.
Oh yeah, and then she's herself again, which is, doesn't she even have the accent when she comes out?
She does have the accent out of the hex. And like I told you, like when she's in it, she doesn't have the accent because like she's just playing the role in an American sitcom, so that makes sense. But like, yeah, she comes out and you have the whole Hayward being a dick, like, you know, I don't know, everything that he says. But then Monica just steps in front of, like, there's even a very, like, almost, I don't know, a very noble, chilling moment that's not even pointed out, but when Monica steps forward to try to talk to Wanda, and literally she's walking in front of, like, a couple of the laser sights that are on Wanda. Like, she's putting herself in the way.
I know.
And yeah, in that scene, she's just, like, talking to her, like, you know, how can I help you? Like, what do you want? Like, you know. But of course, at that point, Wanda has no interest in listening to that. I even told you, like, that scene in particular is like the bargaining.
Oh shit, yeah, that's true. It's gonna be, again, interesting. I keep saying this, but it's so true, to go back to the show, which I definitely am planning on doing. Gonna make my boyfriend watch it, for anybody that's listening, which you already know. I've told you I want to make Ed watch it. I feel like he's really gonna like it, but I feel like I'm gonna pick up on more of the grief, just every little nuance of things that maybe not even everything. I feel like this is a show you probably have to watch a couple times to catch everything, but and I don't even know that much about the MCU or her past in the comics, at least. So like, I'm sure not everything, like you were saying, the commercials and stuff relate a lot to maybe the comics and her backstory. I don't know every single thing, but I'm sure there will be things I'll be like, especially with the 5 stages, or is it 5 stages?
Yeah, I think so.
I was like, wait, is there 6? I don't know. No, I think it's 5. But yeah, I'm sure I'll pick up on that too, because now that you say that, bargaining, because she was pissed when she came out of there and like,
I know,
walked right up to them, and but Monica is great, and I like how she's dealing with her own sort of like tragedy and like and I'm sure depression and everything, and her own loss, but she's still able to be like I want to, like, she understands Wanda on that level, and she wants to help her.
They have a couple great scenes in the series too. I think this would have been like episode 7, but like when she makes her way back inside the hex and goes to Wanda's house and they're just talking, and it's right before Agatha kind of interrupts them and pulls Wanda away because it seems like Monica's getting through to her. You know, she's like saying things to Wanda like, you know, I wish I could take away this pain. I wish I could change this, but I can't because it's my truth. And then in the last episode, she like fully understands Wanda in that, you know, she has a line that she says to her like, you know, given your power and given your abilities, she's like, I'd bring my mom back. Like, she totally understood.
And I'm sure we're gonna get to this when we talk maybe more in depth about just Wanda's arc and everything that she's doing, but like, I fucking get it, like when you're grieving like that, and that's why I like when Monica says that, like I like that, she's making Wanda feel like you're not a villain, like anybody with your powers would probably at least
do the same
want to bring somebody back if they could, kind of thing. I feel like everybody would go through that, especially when you're in the mindset of grieving. I've said this before when we talked about in our Pet Cemetery podcast, because it's very different universe but very similar stories with grief and everything, is like when you're in the headspace of grieving, and I have unfortunately been there a couple times, which I'm sure everybody has, but it's like you feel, it's like you're not even in your right mind at all, really. So like when I said earlier, like, oh, they kind of do paint Wanda as quote unquote being insane, but it's literally from grief. It's not like I'm an outrageous villain, I'm gonna go insane now, or I'm just gonna, it's literally from something that's so real, and that's what I love about it.
See, and I love that that's, a direction they took her character, and that the vast majority of people understand her motivations. But there's
Yeah.
some fuckers. There's some
Yeah.
fuckers on Twitter and other places that just literally are like, look what she just did. She's a fucking villain. Like, what do you people like her for?
Oh, I know. I told you yesterday I was watching. I don't remember the YouTuber's name, or I would actually fucking say it so that people go hate on him. But it was some guy that was talking about his analysis or deep dive of WandaVision, and he's kind of a guy that picks on things anyway. I've watched him a couple times. Sometimes I think he's funny. I saw like he did the similar thing to like with Harry Potter, which I do enjoy Harry Potter, but
Yeah.
he kind of made fun of certain things within. I was like, oh, okay, he did it with Twilight. I don't just certain things I've watched, and I've usually enjoyed his videos, but I was like, all right, let's see what he does say about WandaVision. One thing I hated that he said, because we're basically on the same topic of her grief or whatever, is he was just like, and I told you this already, but it's worth mentioning again, is like he was just like, okay, I found it so unrealistic and just terrible that like he was like, at first I was enjoying WandaVision, then when you just find out, oh, this was all done just because some chick is a little bit sad or something, I was like,
a little bit sad.
that's such a fucking horrible, disrespectful way to describe her story. Like, wow.
Again, people could be invested into what they're invested in, but just completely be disconnected from what the story that they're telling. Like, you want to, just some chick, oh, she was a little bit sad. The first thing that popped into my head, you remember in the second to last episode, it was when Agatha she wanted to know how Wanda did this, and that's when she was going through her past. And that was right after the scene where she was watching, she was sitting on her bed in the Avengers compound, and Vision came in and they were watching it. That's when he has the fucking amazing line that became such a fucking thing.
Oh, it is good. Somebody deserves a fucking Emmy for that.
If not love persevering. I know.
Yes, that's a really good line.
But if you want to talk, oh, she's just a little sad. Like, literally in that scene, Agatha's just prodding her and is like, parents dead, brother dead, Vision dead. What happened when he wasn't there to pull you back from the darkness? So look at all that she's lost, and it's just like, oh, she's just a little sad.
Yeah, like, no, there's definitely reason to be super grieving. Like,
and she just happens to have these powers that, like, and this is totally not excusing any of her actions because they are fucked up. But she realizes that by the end, when she realizes what she's doing, and she lets the people go. But you can also understand why those people would feel the way they feel.
Yeah, but it's almost like, no, and I agree with that. But I still, like, first of all, when it first happens, at least from what I remember, is like she just lets out like this anguish, like agonizing, like scream, and that's when like everything, and she's probably just trying to release her sorrow and everything, which is understandable. And then when it happens and she sees him in front of her, and she's like, holy shit, like, dude, people that say that shit have either A, never really lost anybody super close to them, or B, maybe never, like, I don't understand how people don't I get it is fucked up, and that's why when she realizes it, she chooses the mature thing and the noble thing to do is like, oh shit, I can't keep all these people, like, that's fucked up, so she sacrifices.
She literally lets her family go.
Yeah, she like sacrifices her own happiness for the greater good or whatever, but it's like, I remember saying this to you, and I'm thinking back on it, and I'm being serious, like, if it were me and I was in that same situation and I literally lost everything, including family and like a person I was in love with and found a connection with, after losing all those people, after losing my whole family, and then I finally found a connection with somebody, like, I don't know if I would have had the fucking like the goodness in me to be like, oh, well, I like, maybe I'd be selfish and be like, well, I just want to be with this person. Like, people don't know unless they go through something like that. I feel like that's why her character is so real, because it's so relatable on a deeper level to anybody that's ever experienced loss in any way. So fuck people that say that shit.
Dude, I'm so happy that we're talking about Wanda, man. Just hearing you talk about it, because I know my own thoughts, but just hearing you, like, you're in it, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, because it's true, dude, and she is relatable.
So I guess if you wanted to transition into her grief, I mean, as we go through it, we can continue to talk about the episodes and things like that. I just like, we kind of bounce around as we do, but I like transitioning.
Well, this is the part that I'm like really passionate about anyway, because it's a very big part of why I really loved the story, and I like her as a character in general.
Well, so I always thought, if we can take a couple steps back to like the movies, before this, because it's obviously important context to all this. Yeah. I loved her fucking backstory, and again, it's just such a complex, complicated thing. Like, it's not, first of all, I don't think it's something you'd normally see or hear, like, as a backstory for, I guess, a superhero Avenger. But I love that we saw it in this series. Like, I love that.
I was actually going to relate it to why I love Billy Coen, which is why I think it's funny that you're always that you have said that comparison before. Because like, remember how I said like, oh, I love Billy's backstory because it's tragic and it's fucked up, but it has nothing to do with like Umbrella or bioterrorism. It's just like a fucked up thing that could. So I was thinking the same exact thing as we were watching WandaVision and we saw the flashback of her as a kid. I was like, dude, this is just like a Billy Coen moment in a way, because her backstory really has nothing to do with like a tragedy of like anything really Marvel related. It's like, well, I mean, Tony Stark obviously has
missile, but her war torn country, she just lives in a country that's being repeatedly bombed.
Yeah.
You know, and hey, I've gotten political like this on Twitter before with this specific topic, but hey, what a foreign world that a military contractor hired by the United States government bombs like just poor underdeveloped countries and just doesn't even care about the consequences of like the children that are there and stuff. That's
well,
just
where
like
is she supposed to be like from?
Sokovia, but it's that's
fictitious?
not real.
Okay.
But it's in Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's why like I forget why I didn't say that to you, because was it the other? Maybe I was watching videos on my own or something, and I was just like, oh, I gotta tell Dylan that it does kind of remind me of why I like Billy Coen's backstory, because when it doesn't tie directly to the universe, it's actually sometimes cooler and more unique that it's like, oh, this is like a real thing that could happen. Like Billy's story, it could be like corruption in the military or something. And
if you think about it, like that, as far as her backstory, has very little to do with like normally if it's a superhero or an Avenger, their origins, their backstory.
Yeah.
A huge focal point is how they get their powers and stuff.
Exactly.
And I guess you can connect the dots towards, at least in the movies at that point, her and her brother blamed Tony Stark and the Avengers for her parents' death and the bombings of their country,
right?
Which is the mindset that someone in a country like that would have, which is completely understandable. Why they then go work with Ultron and just try to get revenge on Tony and the Avengers, but like. But no, like from there they did, she did get experimented on by the scepter and everything, so that did give her powers. But yeah, the completely human of that was her reality, and then like you find out in the context of that she actually had her powers before, and she's a witch, and she just didn't, her powers were withering on the vine, like Agatha said. But as far as that, like again, the grief and the tragic of her story, and even when we got through the series. And you still didn't fully understand, like, the sitcoms, like, why sitcoms? Like, we still didn't have that answer. To get the answer that it was literally a comfort place for her and her brother and her parents.
Well,
in the midst of their country that's being bombed. They just had that. Apparently, her father was supposed to be, like, he, like, sold bootleg DVDs, but he, like, held those on for them so they could have those nights together.
See, and that's so like real and family, and I just love it. I don't know well, first I'll just say like I kind of thought that in my head, but I didn't think we were actually going to see it. So that was one of the only things in WandaVision I feel like I called that was. I don't know if I even said it to you early on, but I'm like, maybe I did, but not exactly in how I pictured it was going to happen. But I was just like, oh, is it? Because once we started to find out, it was, especially when Monica gives that great line where she's like, "It's all Wanda" or whatever when she says it at the end. Like then I started to piece together like, oh, well, is it sitcom so that she can just ignore her grief and feel happy because maybe she used to watch these with her family. That was like one of my thoughts that I had, but I wasn't 100% sure. I was like, it seems like something that or I was thinking like maybe she never sat and watched them with her family, but it reminds her of family because these are like family sitcoms or people all get together and sit down. So like I was thinking that it either had to do with A, she did watch them with her family before, or B, they were just great reminders of family. So
yeah, but then definitely, and then that continued too, and that's I guess how Vision became entwined in all of that is because when Agatha brought her back to the Avengers compound when she was going through her past, and she said, Pietro had just died. I was all alone in this new country, and this was the first home that Vision and I shared together. There was other people living there, obviously, but just seeing him come in and sit down with her and Paul Bettany. They're watching Malcolm in the Middle, but. Just side note on the grief aside, but I love Paul Bettany in that scene because he plays obviously Vision so naive as well as sophisticated.
Yeah.
But like, there's a scene where like I guess Bryan Cranston like the roof collapses on it, and then Vision is just like, it's it's funny because of like the grievous injury the man just suffered. And she's
Like,
and
not
she's
really
like,
injured,
oh,
she's like, he's
that's
not.
yeah, and he's like, how do you know? And she's like, it's not that kind of show. And then after he delivers his whole fucking, well, just to walk through the scene,
Yeah.
he's
Well,
trying to talk
and I
to her.
definitely want to talk about their relationship too after we
Absolutely.
get. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But like he's trying to talk to her about like, can't all be sorrow, and like,
Yeah.
trying to just be comforting to her because
Yeah.
Pietro had just died, and she's just again doesn't want to hear it. She's like, why would you think talking about him would bring me comfort? The only thing that's going to bring comfort is seeing him again. Which I'm sure she felt the exact same thing after Vision died. But like amidst all that prophetic, amazing, beautiful writing, I just love then Vision he just starts laughing at the show.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she's like, "It's okay. It's funny."
I'm sorry. I know he's so cute. I love it. His naivety is so funny because like he obviously is super smart and he's wise and he has all these great lines and stuff, but like he also has that because he's experiencing certain
Well, he has
things.
a line in Ultron too that I love when he confronts Ultron at the end, and Ultron's like, "You're unbearably naive," and then he's just like, "Well, I was born yesterday."
I know he's cute. Oh, I love Paul Bettany. Oh my god. We will save him though. I want to definitely talk about him, and I want to talk about him as a character, obviously, and their relationship. But on the grief thing, still, I think it's so unique. I said this to you, and I actually, again, took it upon myself to watch certain interviews and things last night. I was just super into it, and I watched this. I don't know if you'd seen it yet, but it was basically like I guess a Zoom kind of interview. They're still doing those.
Oh yeah.
Amidst COVID, that became like a big thing. But it's like, it has. I don't forgive me, people, and even you, Dylan. I don't know everybody's like actor name, but it had basically everybody that was important. It had Monica. I'm just gonna call them by their character names, but it had Monica. Which you can say the real names.
Tiana Perez.
Yeah. Oh, and I loved her when they said Tiana. I was like, oh, I love that name, so I should have remembered that. But and then they had Darcy, which is Kat Dennings. Right? Yeah, I know her from something else. That's probably why I know. I
love Darcy in the show too. There's not a whole lot to talk about, but I love seeing her again. No. I always thought she was like really funny in the Thor movies, and she was also a good comic relief in this series.
Oh, she was good when they paired her up with Vision, and they did. Oh, that was so great.
I loved her getting invested in the sitcom as well. I know you also love the line too. Yeah, when they paired her with Vision and she was talking and she explained the context of like everything that happened before this that he did not remember.
Yeah.
Him being killed, Wanda having to watch, and then I remember you liking the line where she was he asked her some question, but like, oh, do you know what I am? And she said she didn't know. And then she was just like, but I have been watching WandaVision for the past week, and the love you two share is real. You belong together.
Yeah, I loved that. Oh my god, I can't wait till we do talk more about their relationship. But I mean, I guess like we kind of talked about everything that there is really about the grief. But one thing I wanted to say in terms of them being so bold as to write a story as like, this is literally at the end of the day, if you take away all the complex elements that make it so great, but if you strip all that away, it's literally just about a woman grieving, and I fucking love the simplicity of that. And I love that Catherine Hahn said this. I was referencing an interview I watched last night where she was just like, no offense, but this isn't like, oh, this, I got bit by a spider and I have powers. And she was like, this is literally about like just a woman that's going through such horrible turmoil that I feel like almost 99% of the humans on Earth or everybody should be able to relate to, although there are some assholes, oh, it's just a sad girl, like that's terrible. Like everybody has lost somebody, whether it's to death, whether it's a bad breakup, whether it's just anything in your life that you've ever gone through where you've lost. It could be a fucking pet that you care. I don't care what it is. It's something that meant something to you and you lost it. Like everybody has experienced grief. There's different types of grief. There's people deal with grief differently. And like she like, we already talked about like her childhood, losing her brother, and then like I feel like the nail in the coffin for which is why all this happened is like after losing Vision, she was just like she didn't have anybody. Like she's not like she's not very. I mean, she is obviously like she is an Avenger and she's cool, but like I never felt like she was like super cool. I mean, I know her and Captain America actually do have a pretty good. He's just always so nice to everybody, but she just didn't.
Well, her and Clint as well.
And Clint,
Hawkeye. They always thought that like he became like a surrogate brother for her afterwards, but yeah, it's just. As far as like a deep connection, yeah.
No, so that I just wanted to say, like, and again, we can wrap up on the grief thing, but it's like such an important thing and why I was sucked into. I already liked her story in the movies for that reason, but then they obviously explored even more. I didn't think WandaVision was going to deal anymore with like her. Well, I guess it had to because Vision was dead, but I
Vision was
thought,
dead.
oh, they're gonna resurrect. And what I really thought, and Catherine Hahn said this too, freaking love her because she was like every. Or maybe she didn't exactly say this, but she was basically saying, like, it's not like there was this big, there ends up being a villain in, which haha is her, but we'll talk about her too, but, like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a straight up, like, black and white, like, Marvel movie, which, again, all of them are great, all of them have so many layers to them. I'm not trying to say take anything away from the actual Marvel movies. It's all amazing writing, it's all character driven, it's all really good and deep and
Yeah.
sad, but it's not, like, with at least the ones I've seen, it's usually pretty straightforward in structure at first until they throw a bunch of twists to you and people dying and it's fucking heartbreaking. But at first it's just usually like, okay, there's the heroes and the bad guys, and the bad guy wants to try to change the world by doing A, B, and C, and the good guys have to, it's
Right.
like kind of set up basically. There's a
There's
format
a Marvel
to it.
formula, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with WandaVision, oh my god, it's so unique, and I just love how in the end it's revealed that, dude, she's just fucking, I can't even, like, it's so hard to even put it into words, but
Well, I know I told you this too, that I've watched interviews before, plenty, on this show, and like the writer creator has literally said before that, like, they decided to, because Agatha's an interesting character in Wanda's comic book history. She
Right.
most of the time is like a mentor figure for her. She helps her understand her powers
yeah,
and learn how to use them, which she does do in this show. They just went in a slightly more antagonistic way in this show. So that they said that, like, for the structure of this show, we realized at the end, oh, we might need a figure like that.
yeah,
But at the same time, the creator writer, her name's Jack Schaefer, has said that, and I think it's just such a fucking bold choice, that I've said this to you, that they chose to make the villain of the show is just Wanda's grief.
I know, I love that. That is so, the
It's
fact that
such
they
a-
were so aware of that
Yeah.
and they purposely did that. Oh, excuse me. And they purposely did that. I just love that. Again, I love the,
In a sense, like, the old fucking adage of you're your own worst enemy or whatever.
yeah, and that's what makes her kind of like, I really do love the term anti-hero because it's like sometimes, because not everybody in real life, and I like this about the Marvel characters in general, all of them kind of have moments like this, or at least, a handful of them do. It's like, you're not always going to be, even if you're a good guy and you're fighting for the greater good, like a flawless person that never makes any mistakes or makes people question their affection for you. So the fact that I've always, always, always liked anti-heroes, and one that always comes to mind when I think of that word is Joel from The Last of Us, because
Yeah.
he does do things that are fucked up, and he does do things where you're like, well, why am I rooting for him? But you play as him and you see it through his eyes and you relate and you can understand to a certain degree. Exactly the same way I thought about Wanda through this whole thing. So if there were people still at the end of this that were like, oh, well, they just made her a villain, like, well, that's fine. People can have their own opinions, but that's just ridiculous to me, because I know if it was me in her shoes, again, I feel like I'd become a fucking villain because maybe I'm selfish. I don't know if I'd be able to give up my reuniting with a loved one, having this like perfect ideal family. Maybe if I saw the people, because all of them end up gathering around her, and I know she feels really bad and she never intended
Oh yeah, that was an
but
intense scene. Yeah.
I know, and that's just
Talk
part
about
of
that
it
scene.
too.
I definitely want to talk about the scene, but we can talk about that when we talk about Agatha. But yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But like, I don't know, and I told you this yesterday when we were planning the podcast. I was like, oh, I really honestly don't mind getting a little deep in my own personal history, but like, I feel like I can relate to Wanda on different levels because
Yeah.
like she will. Thank the Lord, and I always say this every day. I mean, I'm not super religious, but like, I just think whatever God is out there, that I still am fortunate enough to have both my parents in my life. I'm extremely close to my family. I love my family so much. I love my parents so much. I'm close to both of them, and I just don't even know when that day comes, like, what the fuck I'm gonna do. I probably will go fucking like Wanda insane. Like, I don't know. Like, it's gonna
Yeah.
be rough. So I'm very fortunate for that, but I can relate to Wanda on losing a sibling, specifically a brother, because I have.
Yeah.
And it was awful, and it was shitty, and it was like one of the worst things
Yeah.
ever. So it's like, so I already have that, but like, I don't know if I ever even told you this, Dylan, but even when it comes to her losing vision, I don't know if I ever told you about this, but basically I lost, which was, besides my brother, like the worst death I've ever had to go through, and it was in 2017, so it was like a couple years ago. And I was in the current relationship that I'm in. I was with Ed. You've met Ed, you know him. I'm just saying current relationship for context of the podcast, but I basically had dated the same guy before I ever met Ed, who I'm with now, and I'm happy with him. We're all good. But before I was with him, I was in a very serious relationship for like 6 years, from basically adolescence to adulthood, from high school, actually middle school, all the way up to being out of high school, with the same guy. And he ended up, unfortunately, having just addiction issues and just things in his own personal demons, which caused friction in our relationship. And we weren't together, but he ended up overdosing in 2017. And again, even though I'm not directly relating it to Wanda and Vision, because she actually was actively in that relationship and was with him at that time, it just really like caught me off. I mean, we were still kind of friends and we would talk from time to time. He understood that I was with, I had moved on, I was in another relationship and whatever, but like he was just always a friend, and he was somebody that from time to time I'd be like, well, how are you? Like, he was a big part of my life. When you are in a relationship, I think from that young to in your adult, it's makes an impact. So like even some of that maybe is why like I've gravitated so much towards their relationship, and her character is just like, damn, like if I still had been in that relationship and that had happened, like I don't know what, like when you're it's just it actually like, and I'm not gonna get like super emotional and like sit here and cry or anything, but it actually puts like this, like I told you this when we were watching the show too, like this weight on my like chest, like I can feel it, which means I can feel her fucking pain and her grief, which that is good writing and that is good acting on her part, obviously, like that you can so relate your own life to something like that, like it's just amazing to me because like go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, not to interrupt, but like you were saying what Catherine Hahn said, like everyone experiences grief and everyone can, has lost people and can relate to, certain things in their own way. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I've worded this specifically to you, but like, I do know that it was last October that my dad died.
I know, yes, and I'm so sorry. I know, I remember that.
Well, again, Wanda is just such a part of my head. I feel like by the time, the show had came out, I don't know, 5-6 months later. But I feel like, again, the journey and just being able to relate things to your own experiences, there's a small part of the show that kind of helped me wrap up that, deal with
really?
That. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome though. See, that's why like entertainment and things that we really love are just more than that sometimes. That's why I totally get it. Oh, see, my heart feels heavy now, but but it's also a good thing. Like, I hate when people are like, "Oh, that's just too depressing." I've heard people criticize certain Netflix shows I've never watched, so I can't defend them one way or another. I don't even remember some of their names, but like people would just shit on stuff for being, "Oh, that's too depressing," or "you're showing suicide." But like honestly, those things are fucking real and they happen. Addiction and losing people, so that happens. Or my brother died in a car accident. Like you can't hide people from things that really do happen, because when they happen to you, you're gonna be like, "Oh, what the fuck." Like it's real. And we talked about this too, a similar thing with, again, always relating things to either Resident Evil or Pet Sematary, like with Pet Sematary, with people criticizing like Stephen King killing a child in the way that he does. It's like, well, it's unfortunate and shitty and it's fucked up, but kids do die sometimes at that young, like accidents happen, things happen. So if people like with WandaVision, it's definitely a depressing show, but in a way that like brings me kind of comfort, if that makes sense, because it's like, oh, I'm not the only one that's ever been mentally fucked up from losing somebody. Like, it's like everybody goes through that, and her being, especially her being an Avenger, or quote unquote like a hero, and going through that, it's like, oh shit, like even she, who's this strong badass with these powers, and she's definitely badass when she fights, and she almost killed fucking Thanos, but even she has emotional turmoil because everybody fucking dies. It's so raw and real, and that's really why I dig her story so much, and especially WandaVision, because it's literally, again, you strip away all the complexity of the show. It's about a woman grieving over love lost ones. It's so sad, but it's like, I love it. It's not, again, it's not sad to the point where I'm like, oh, this is too dark, I can't watch this. Like, gets me in my feels. Again, it gets me in my feels, but in a way where it's like, I get it.
Yeah, and it speaks to the quality of the show and the quality of the writing, that it's so well done. It doesn't just, I don't know, just leave you in that like it's unwatchable because it's so depressing or something like that.
No, definitely not. I mean, and people say that about Pet Sematary. I've heard people say that about, there are some movies out there that I've watched where I'm like, oh man, that is so sad, I have to be in a certain mindset for it. But it's like, overall, like I would never criticize or be like I would never say anything negative against something that really puts me in my feels, because that's how it's something that's good and relatable. And then just quickly to wrap up on her grief, I want to tell you something that Brittany told me yesterday, because her and I were talking about WandaVision and just the whole story. We were just texting, and she said, I love something that's Wanda says when it was a scene you and I were just talking about, when Vision walks into the room and sits on the bed and they're watching Malcolm in the Middle or whatever, and Brittany was like, I always thought about she was referencing our brother. She was like, when Wanda says, the only way I can feel, like, you really think talking about it's going to make me feel better? The only way I would feel better is actually seeing him. Apparently, I guess when Brittany heard that line, because again, she's my sister, we both lost our brother, she just immediately thought of how she felt when our brother passed away, and that was how she was feeling. Like, I don't want to talk about him, because, like, certain people, when they grieve too, they just shut down, and everybody deals with it differently. So she was like, she really, like, related our pain of that to that, like, line. So I'm like, it's literally so deep. It's so deep, and I'm such an asshole for thinking at first that Marvel was so surface level, because now look, I can relate it to different points in my life and different people that I've lost. I dig it. I really do dig it.
No, it's just so well written, and it handles that subject like just incredibly. I can't say enough positive things about how well it handles her grief and just everything.
Deals with it,
how she deals with it, how she comes out of it, how she doesn't want to come out of it, because in a superhero way, like when she walks out of that bubble and she's like, this is your last warning, stay out of my home. She does not want them to fuck up what she has
paradise,
back.
She like creates her own, because she doesn't have anything. It's so, I can literally keep talking about it. I can go into the complexity. It's just so, it just, again, gives me, I remember I kept saying that to you as we were watching. I'm like, dude, I have like this like pain in my chest for some reason. I didn't really fully understand at the time, but it's like, I feel like even on a subconscious level, I was relating some of the shit that I've been through in my life with what she was going through, even though it's not 100% the same circumstances. Like, it just made me, I don't know, it's just like, it's so real and raw. It just makes you definitely relate on some level. But
I know, definitely.
Well, if you want to go on a lighter note, we can talk about Agatha, because she's funny, and then we could go into like Wanda and Vision, and then we could like wrap up. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That we could go that direction. I have a couple other notes, and I'm sure there's other moments from other episodes that I'll want to mention. But there was one little thing when I guess it stems from her grief and just the way that she built this reality, the sitcominess of it. All of it had a reason to do. Like it was so important to her. There's a very little line when in episode 3 when she's pregnant and her and Vision are like, she wants to name the kid Tommy, and he's like, oh, I want to name him Billy, and those are names from the comics, but Vision kind of says, like, of course in a Vision way, he's like, oh, after William Shakespeare.
Oh yeah.
But
I
then
remember that.
But then Wanda wants Tommy because she's just like, oh, an all-American name, and that goes to the sitcoms. Like she just connected so well with the sitcoms. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting, because like if they were the names in the comics, so they just wrote that line to kind of fit it with. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Just a quick tangent before we get to Catherine Hahn on Paul Bettany. You said you watched some interviews, mostly probably for WandaVision, but he's told this story in a lot of interviews before WandaVision that he voiced Jarvis in the MCU for so long, and then he literally at one point said he said this in interviews where he got off the phone with like his manager, his agent, and he felt like, okay, well, I guess this is it. Like, I guess I gotta stop acting like this is the end of it.
Oh.
And then he literally says he's told the story like he sat down on a stoop or something, and then he got a phone call from Joss Whedon. It was like, I want you to be the Vision.
Oh shit, that's awesome. I actually didn't hear that. I heard the one where he was saying after, I guess they kill Vision off in
Infinity War.
Yeah, in Infinity War, that he was like, yeah, I just thought, they're gonna fire me. I'm done. He
went into he was called into a meeting, and he went in, and he was just like, he's always like, in a British way, I was just like, well, it was so nice, thank you for having me. And they were like, are you quitting? And he's like, oh, you're not firing me?
And then they pitched him WandaVision, and he was like, oh, okay. Oh, that's great. I love that. He's just so great. Oh, I love him.
But on to Catherine Hahn.
She's just amazing.
Such a brilliant fucking choice. If I were to send you a picture of Agatha Harkness from the comics, she looks nothing like Catherine Hahn.
Really?
She just looks like an old lady because she's supposed to be a centuries-old witch, which she is in the show, and they show that flashback.
Right.
But I just thought she was such a perfect choice. First of all, because she's such an amazing comedian from a sitcom angle, she played, just like Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, she played all the sitcoms so well.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Oh,
to see
100%.
her make that turn into the villain was just something like to behold. Like she was so good in both roles.
I know, and she was so, like, the first time, and again, I seriously, obviously, I don't even know the comics, had no idea who she was gonna
Mhm.
turn out to be. So at first I just thought, oh, Katherine Hahn's in this because she's funny, and she's gonna be really good in the sitcom moments, which she is, obviously, of course. But I had no idea it was gonna extend beyond that, because I remember when you first see her in, like, the 50s episode, when she comes in again as the nosy neighbor or whatever, and she's just kind of obnoxious, but she fits that type of, I don't know, like obnoxious kind of I Love Lucy-ish kind of neighbory
Yeah.
character that I'm like, oh my god, and she just
Like
everybody.
Wanda and Agnes are like Lucy and Ethel.
Yeah, that's literally what I was relating it to at first in my head. I was like, because I've seen the Dick Van Dyke Show, but I've never seen it all the way through, or I don't even think I've seen it for the last like couple years or so. I watched it when I was a
Mhm.
kid, but I Love Lucy is something I've kept tabs on. I love it. So a lot of certain
Yeah.
things I was relating to, like, oh, I know this is supposed to be Dick Van Dyke, but I know that there's nods to maybe other things. And I don't know, even the fact that even though it was black and white, the fact that like Elizabeth Olsen is like a redhead, well, at least in the show,
Mhm.
Wanda is, and she had like the curls. I'm like, ah, that's so I Love Lucy. But anyway, that's Lucille Ball. But yeah, when Agatha first comes in, I literally just thought she's gonna be throughout the decades with them. But well, I didn't even know that yet. I didn't know like she was gonna continue. Then when I saw her in the 60s episode, I'm like, okay, so she's gonna go into the decades with them, and she's literally just gonna be the kind of nosy neighbor, the comic relief when things get heavy or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever I was thinking, I don't even remember. But literally
Mhm.
had no idea she was gonna become maybe bigger until maybe that, and I don't even know what I was thinking, that I'm trying to think back. That scene where she was talking to that guy, like she was he was like trimming the hedges or something into her, and then like remember
Oh
Vision comes
yeah,
out and he's like,
Herb.
yeah, Herb, and then like that's when she does her famous like wink or whatever, like that became a
Mhm.
gif and a meme and just
Yeah.
blew up. But like at that point I was like, oh, does she kind of know something? But then everybody in
Yeah.
the town started acting weird, like maybe so I was like, maybe it's not specifically her, I don't know.
Her.
It was.
Yeah, because there was like I think she was the first character that like it was in episode 5, which was the 80s,
Mhm.
and Wanda did her magic in front of her, and Vision was like, "What are you doing?
Oh
Agnes
yeah,
is right there," and she's like,
yeah,
"Oh, she didn't even notice." And
yeah.
then like she was so Agnes was so like oblivious or just didn't even care to like the twins like aged up twice in front of
And
her,
she
and it was
didn't.
just
Yeah,
she didn't like even seem to react to that.
it
So you
was
knew
weird.
something was up there, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like even like I said I think it was the 70s episode. I almost said 70s show. Ha, that's where my brain goes. Even in the 70s episode, it seemed like I was like, oh, but then I kind of like I was like, oh, okay, like she. But then because she was talking to her or whatever his name is, like I was like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe like the townspeople like just kind of maybe it's all of them and it's not maybe just like they kind of threw me off like, oh, she's not gonna. I really didn't think she was gonna be a villain. The moment where I was like, oh shit, is when Monica came back and was really
Mhm.
trying to get through to Wanda, like, and she
Yep.
seemed like she almost was to a certain degree, and then well, I guess it was still Agnes at that point was like, don't listen to her, come on or whatever, and like grabbed her and like started pulling her back towards
Mhm.
the house or whatever. I was like, oh shit, something's going on. But again, me not knowing the comics, I probably would have never pieced together like who she was actually supposed to be. But it is cool that they brought her in from the
Yeah.
comics.
I know that was a big deal too because for comic fans, like there was a lot of fan theories that did not pan out, like the Mephisto stuff that became
Hmm.
such a big thing. Like people thought Mephisto, Marvel's devil, was involved in this somehow because he's involved
Yeah.
with Wanda in the comics, and that didn't end up being a thing. But like most people were convinced that she was Agatha Harkness, and then when
Mm.
she reveals herself at the end of episode 7, and she says, lovely to finally meet you. The name's Agatha Harkness. People fucking lost their shit, man.
Well, did
Just the
you?
confirmation that that was her.
Well, I feel like I asked you this already, but we're in the podcast. I'm just curious. Like, did you sense and maybe think that she was because of the name and maybe like
I knew she had to be, and I knew if she didn't end up being, that would have been like a just big disappointment.
appointment? Yeah. Well, it's weird that they made her name in the sitcom world Agnes, which is very close to Agatha, so maybe
Yeah,
like fans can piece it together. But like with fucking Monica Geraldine, that's not anything
Geraldine.
close to
I know.
Monica. So I don't know. Maybe they didn't want that revealed, or I don't know if people would have even caught on to that. But that's
Right.
interesting. But
Yeah.
No, but Catherine Hahn's great. She's not only funny, but even when she was like, I was like, oh shit, she's the villain. Like, is she gonna be like? Because I know Catherine Hahn's acting and she's amazing. But I've only ever really seen her in kind of like over the top comedies. For
Comedies.
example,
Yeah.
I love Step Brothers. It's such a dumb movie with Will
Hmm.
Ferrell, and what's his name, John C. Reilly, but she's in it and she's great in it. And
We saw
so
her
I've
on
only
Parks and Rec.
and Parks and Rec. Yeah, I was gonna say like I've only ever really seen her on kind of comedy stuff. So I'm like, so when she became the villain, I'm like, okay, is she gonna be like, she's great? Is she gonna be the type of villain that's just like over the top cheesy cracking jokes? And she did crack some jokes, but they were freaking hilarious.
They were.
There was a moment where she like made fun or like mocked Wanda, and you and I were just like laughing our asses off. I forget, what did she do?
Oh yeah. I think I know what you mean. It was in the basement, and Wanda was like, "Where are my children?" And she just comes around the corner. Where are my children?
Yeah.
And she was like, I feel like that had to have been like a riff or a dig at the fact that Wanda's accent did soften in the movies for a story reason, but it did soften.
Yeah.
And then in this context of the show, like she has the American accent in the sitcom, and then sometimes she doesn't because like she's hit by the real world or whatever. But no, that was great. It's, where are my children? She was like, woof, that accent. It was comes and goes. Then she also had a line in the last episode when White Vision showed up, and then Vision came up to fight him, and then she was just like floating on the roof, and she was like, "Oh, Wanda, your ex and your boyfriend at the same part. Who are you gonna choose, Wanda?"
I know, I was dying. So like she was funny, but not in a way that I thought. Like she wasn't like a cartoony villain. Like, you know, like I always kind of say like a good example of that, even though I do personally like him as a villain, but like Salazar from RE4, again, always relating shit to Resident Evil, but he's kind of a cartoony villain or whatever, says cheesy dumb shit. But like with her, it was just like it was actually kind of witty and funny, and like it was really well timed because she's such a comedian. Like when she did mock Wanda, it's such a serious big moment, and you feel bad for Wanda. She just, you know, she doesn't know where her kids are, but like with her coming around the corner just mocking her, I remember I lost my shit at that. She's great, but even her acting on the more serious parts, like she's obviously a great comedian with great comedic timing. Everybody knows that, but like I was like, ooh, is she gonna be able to do like the villainous parts? Because I, again, from my knowledge of her, I've only ever really seen her do comedy, and she did so good. Like in the parts where it went back in her past, and she was tied up to that stair, they were gonna like burn or whatever they were gonna do to her because
the witches were her coven was gonna burn her because they said she was like practicing the darkest of magic. Even
that, I was like, wow, like she did really, really good there. And even some of the darker villainous moments that she had with Wanda, I was like, wow, she's actually really selling it and killing it, and that's awesome. So she was really well cast all around. Like she did the comedy parts well, which obviously, but she also did the dark stuff really well. And I don't know if you, I mean, you know WandaVision more than I do, but like I was again watching a bunch of interviews last night, and I heard her say that like, so I don't know if you've heard this, that she does have 2 kids, and apparently her kids have always loved Marvel, and so like the interviewer was like, well, you know, Catherine, do your kids just think you're like totally awesome now because you were involved in like a Marvel project? And she was like, oh, they would probably never tell me, they're too stubborn or prideful. But she was like, but I will have to say my daughter wrote me a note that I'm going to keep forever when she first saw, I guess, the ending of WandaVision or whatever, and she was like, that basically just said, Mom, you're a total badass. And like she I was like, that is so funny and cute that, like I love it.
And it's something that I'm sure, I think it came from that. We'll see that in the making of when we do watch that.
Okay.
Like she was so committed to it as well. Like there's like a little shot of her shooting the scene where she's in Agatha's all get up and like the fans are blowing on her, like blowing all the air around her, and she delivers the line, and then she literally on a dime, you know, comes out of character and like so intently is like shouting at the director, like she's like one more, like she
I
wanted
saw
to.
that.
Yeah.
I didn't see the full making of, which I definitely want to, but I've seen, I guess when I was watching interviews and stuff, they referenced that, so I've seen that. Like she's like really committed and a really obviously really good actress, and I love too that she seems in real life, like I've never knew that much about her other than the couple comedy movies or shows I've seen her in, but like she's so like humble and so like awesome about the other cast. Like she was like talking about how she was so thrilled to, first of all, just be a part of a Marvel thing in general, because she said her kids always watched, she knew what it was, like she always followed it, but that like she was like working with these people, and she was talking about like obviously Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, but she was also like with oh god, again, forgive me, Tiana, what's her last name? That's such an easy name, I gotta remember that. Okay. Oh, okay, I will get it. Yeah, that's a good one. But just she was just like working with everybody, and everybody was so nice, and everybody was so professional and such great acting. Like it made me want to, you know, be on my game because I was acting with these great people. I was just like, wow, she's awesome. So, and she was the one that really put it in perspective of maybe why I feel I relate to Wanda, or she puts it better she can articulate better than I can as to why WandaVision is so unique and cool is that she literally was like, she said no offense and looked like right at the camera, I guess because she didn't want to offend any like Spider-Man fans or anything, but she was just like, this is a story about a character that didn't get bit by a spider. You don't really know, it's not all focused on her powers or character or the superhero elements of her, but her actual humanity.
It's funny, I'm sure she related to that too, because she literally, before WandaVision, there's a Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was like an animated Spider-Man movie that came out, and she voiced like a villain in that, so that's probably why she related to that. Oh,
maybe that's why she said, maybe that's also why she said no offense, because she was in it, but like, she's like, what it boils down to is this is literally about a woman grieving, and I'm like, oh god, that's why I love it so much. So I love when she saw that too. Everybody can see that obviously, but like the way that she just like was like really focused on that in the interview, she was like, I love how unique this is, and it's just focused on a woman who has just been through so much, and I'm just like, yeah, girl, I totally get it. So so she was awesome, hands down awesome. I don't really know what else we can say about her other than she was great. She gave a really good performance, and if her and Elizabeth Olsen both go up for Emmys, I hope they can both win. Maybe if like Elizabeth Hansen, like maybe the supporting, and like if Elizabeth Olsen's in the main or whatever, like that'd be awesome if they both won.
Yeah, no, that would be very, very deserving. I feel like, and I would get fucking hyped.
100%, I agree.
All right, well, I think the last thing I want to talk about before we do get to Wanda and Vision, because of course that's a perfect thing to end on, was Evan Peters as fake Pietro, or as Agatha said near the end, Pietro. See, before the series came out, I was like, they have to include Pietro somehow. He's such an important part of her story, and I don't know if you really noticed it too much with everything else going on, but like, he's literally not mentioned after he's killed in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Apparently in Civil War, in her bedroom, there's like a picture of him somewhere. I've never really noticed it, but like as far as the mention of him, that they never mentioned him since then until now.
Why though?
I don't know, maybe the movies are too big, like even in the space of Wanda's story, like Wanda and Vision story, like there wasn't, I don't know, they're on the run, they're trying to keep the stone, everything, but like, especially coming from a comic book perspective, like, I say this like a lot, like you don't understand, Brandi, like when something happens, especially when it's relating to the comics, but like,
yeah.
Wanda and Pietro first showed up in the post-credit scene of The Winter Soldier, which was Cap's second movie, and then they went into Ultron. But when Baron von Strucker, who has an Easter egg in this, and I think I told you when we watched it, he's like the fucking main bad guy, stupid villain in Resident Evil Apocalypse.
Wait, who?
You wouldn't remember. That was so long ago in the Marvel movies. But remember there was like that weird like in Apocalypse.
Do. Yes. I remember, because I remember thinking of where do I know him from, and you said I remember. Okay.
Yeah. But like in that post-credit scene where they first show up, when he says, the twins.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, the twins. They're such a fucking deal. Especially, I never really read Avengers comics, but I love X-Men comics, and I love, again, they're X-Men adjacent, and Quicksilver maybe even a little more than Scarlet Witch from what I remember. But like, Wanda and Pietro are a big fucking deal. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, they're Magneto's children, so they're a big deal. So it was always a little like off-putting that he was killed in his first appearance at the end of Ultron, which of course drove her story, which was good, but I don't know. I always felt like he should have had a bigger role, and then for him never to be mentioned. And then when the show came out, I was like, okay, he's got to be involved somehow. And I remember my reaction to like everyone. I remember because of course I've watched so many videos, and people like got so hyped when they, you see the back of his head, and in that episode, which was the 80s, they kept mentioning Wanda's brother.
Oh yeah.
And then they show the back of his head, and it's all white, and people were all pumped. But when it was Evan Peters, I remember being like, what? Like, I wanted somehow to... Oh, that
made people hype, or...?
No, it made people hype. My first reaction was like, that's not her brother. Like, that's not... And that was the point later.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time. But it was like, I wanted to see Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who played him in Age of Ultron.
Right.
So that impact was not there for me, but then, like, I get it. I get what they were doing, but... And then, like, the meta thing of, like, he played the version of Quicksilver in the X-Men movies, and at that time, before
See, I dig that. Even though I didn't know that till you told me, I'm like, that's kind of cool that they did that for some fanfare of like people that love both or wanted.
Well, they really tricked people because they specifically had mentioned WandaVision as the beginning of, and here's some comic book weeds. They specifically have talked about Wanda as the beginning of the multiverse saga, so like the alternate universes. And like even it kind of is, because Wanda does create her own little pocket dimension in WandaVision, but then that goes into Doctor Strange 2 and then some other movies. So that really did trick some people into thinking, shit, Fox just bought or Disney just bought Fox, so they have the X-Men. Is this how they're gonna do it? Somehow the Fox Quicksilver is here, and why is he here? And it was a whole big, thing.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that they included a reference to her brother. In general, even Agatha was all fucked up because when she explained that she's the one who created or brought in this fake Pietro and she was controlling Ralph Boner.
I remember he laughed at it too. That's so funny.
Yeah. But like she even said to Wanda, like, oh yeah, necromancy was a non-starter because your real brother's body is on another continent and full of holes. Like that's just also dark and fucked up. But so I appreciate the reference to Pietro, but I wish it was a little more. I wish he, was involved a little more in this, like the original actor.
Oh, you mean just his character? Well, I'm surprised that you weren't one of the fans that was like super hype about that, only because I know you love both like franchises and you've always wanted them to intertwine where they should or whatever. So I'm very surprised that wasn't immediately like, oh, that's cool. I mean, I guess it was, but you also prefer like because he was already established in Marvel to like to have seen.
Yeah.
I wonder what that actor felt like. He's probably like, damn.
I know.
For WandaVision.
Well, I think the reason why I wasn't was because there's X-Men movies that I do like, and there's castings in those movies that I do like, and I think Evan Peters is a good casting for that version of Quicksilver, but there's so much baggage with those X-Men movies. Like X-Men needs just a complete like clean slate when they're rebooted into the MCU. I didn't want, like, I honestly, as much as I like some of those movies, I did not want any versions of those characters coming over, which was kind of the hint at the beginning. Although I have tweeted that the one casting from the X-Men movies that I would love, I don't know if you know the actor, but he's pretty big actor.
Lawrence, like, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely fucking not.
I know. Sorry.
Michael Fassbender. He plays Magneto in the X-Men movies,
I
like the
love
young Magneto. And Ian McKellen plays the older one, but like Fassbender plays the younger one. And I've tweeted multiple times that I'm like, if there's one casting that I'd be okay with coming over, like I would, if they brought Michael Fassbender into the MCU as Magneto, and he was retconned as Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch's father, I'd be like, ooh, I'm on board. I fucking buy it. I fucking love that.
Hey, they're both hot. I believe it too. I've watched X-Men before, but only like up to a very minimal point. Like I don't even think a lot of it, like it was like back in like 2014, so up to whatever was out at that time. So I haven't seen anything since that or beyond that, but I really, really liked what I saw. I don't even remember a whole lot. I just remember I liked the idea of mutants and people that didn't really fit in with the society. I mean, because again, it goes back to that thing. I love anti-heroes, but
very tiny, very, very tiny tangent, and then we can go into Wanda and Vision. But I always felt like, even though they didn't have the rights to X-Men for the longest time, I feel like with Wanda they kind of planted those seeds, because X-Men is all about, mutants are things that humanity like doesn't understand, and they're hated and feared because it's, humanity does not understand, like they're born with these powers or whatever, and like they're pariahs in a sense. But like, Wanda very much was that in Civil War, and then in here, it was kind of a perfect segue into the mutants, because those fucking, like, the humans that she did that to hated her, so it was kind of like a similar thing.
No, that makes sense. And
I'm sure they were scared of her too.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, she has, like, at least at first, especially when she's in early appearances of her, especially when she first loses her brother and she's just pissed off. She definitely has like this darkness about her that seems like, oh, like she could potentially. That's why I like her character though, because she could potentially like be villainous especially when she's on the war path of just being super angry, especially at like Tony Stark or whatever. But the cool thing and complex thing about her character is she has this like she has this thing in her where it's like, oh, she could be villainous, whatever. She's angry, she's hurt,
she's Magneto's daughter.
But she also, yeah, but she also like she saw what like a war-torn country, like she lived through that, and she saw innocent people, including her own family, get blown to pieces. So I'm pretty sure like that also helps keep her more grounded and more like, oh, like I feel like Wanda would only be a villain when she's going after people that personally like affected her. Like obviously that's why she's after Tony Stark and the Avengers and everything at first, and then
Thanos.
Yeah, exactly. Like
she had
whoever
personal
was really
stakes
wronged her. Exactly. So it's not like she would ever purposely hurt anybody that was innocent. So I think when she finds out about the town in WandaVision, she's just like, oh shit, like
that's her motivation. But like, as far as like how other people would then see her.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah. Well, that tangent aside, if you want to get into the end and the meat, of course, of WandaVision.
Yes. My favorite parts of it. Well, my two biggest things that I really love, and I think is what attracted me to it, and well, three. So the first one is the sitcom thing. That's like more of a surface level thing. I just love that it pays homage to sitcoms I love and grown up with. So that's already amazing. And I love the 50s and 60s and even the 70s like aesthetic. That's just dope as fuck to me. The second thing is, of course, her grief and being able to relate to her, which I could have all along, even in the movies, but this like explored it. It had more time to explore it, obviously. And then the third thing is what we're about to talk about, and that is her relationship with Vision. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. Well, I loved, just as for backstory, I love their slow build of their connection. Even though you said, and I agree, it would have been nice to have seen more of their relationship in the movies, but
develop a little more. Yeah.
Didn't really have the time for that. But just seeing them slowly become more connected, and especially because, like, in WandaVision, I mean, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, before they had like the backstory, always thought like, oh, they're drawn closer together because their power comes from the same stone, so the stone is drawing them together. But like in WandaVision, you see that moment where he's trying to connect to her and trying to make her feel better and like understand her grief and her feelings towards her brother more. That was probably the first moment that drew them together. And then,
he's so sweet to her. I know.
And then, like I said, which I've always loved, the writers, directors of like the last couple Avengers movies have said like they loved the thing that helped kind of Vision become more human and more connected with his humanity because he is a robot was Wanda.
Oh yeah, that's what I see. I don't know if that was ever outwardly expressed or whatever. Again, the movies are so long and there's so the moments with WandaVision are so sparse. Unfortunately, I wish there were more. But I mean, now we have the whole show or whatever. But still, you know what I mean. The movies. It would have been cool to see their relationship more slowly develop. But I also get it because they didn't have a lot of time. But yeah, I always kind of gathered that. I was like, oh, like, is she the one that's making him more human, which is so awesome because it's like he's starting to understand human emotion more and feel for her and try to make her like, oh, I just love it. I really do love even the start of their relationship in the movies is so great. They're just like, oh, they're the perfect couple.
They are. Well, I mean, as far as the movies go, like I said, there's very few, at least early on, very few scenes between them. But like the first one that I told you that I mentioned to you after we'd seen it, that they have like a scene where it's just dialogue between them and connection is when he's like making her dinner with paprika.
Oh yeah, that's so cute.
And I love the end of it where she's like, I don't know what's in this, but it is not paprika because he's never eaten anything before.
He's so cute. I know. And I think I just love his character so much because he is such a mix of, like, we were talking about earlier, like, naivety and, like, but also extremely wise because he knows, like, everything. Yeah. But, like, it's a mix that you wouldn't think would fit, but it just fits so well. And Paul Bettany just portrays it so well. And he's also, like, I don't want to, I can't even think of the word, but I don't want to just use, oh, he's so sweet or he's so kind or he's so, like, giving to her or whatever, but like he really, like, I guess for lack of better words,
understands her.
Yeah, but like even
it's a hard word to
to
find,
go far, but like he's so like brave and courageous too. For like he literally is willing to sacrifice himself because he knows like, oh shit, like oh god, to see people are gonna be like, well, you're not a real fan. What's the one where she does have to fucking kill him, which is so fucking sad. I hated that scene. But what was loved it and hated it. But which one is that in where she literally has to kill him?
Infinity War.
Yeah, like she like, and he's like, you can. Oh my god, that whole scene.
She doesn't want to do it for like the whole movie. Elizabeth Olsen's acting, both of their acting in that movie, but
oh, I know. No, but that scene specifically,
in particular.
He like when he grabbed. Oh my god, one thing again, his character is just so. Oh, he's like uniquely like. No adjectives are coming to me. Like he's like so noble and just and so kind to her, and that's like just trying to talk her through it, even though he knows it's hurting her. Because remember, he's like, it's all right, or she's like, I can't, and he's like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, oh my god, stop! Like oh my god,
I could quote that scene line for line.
Oh.
All the other Avengers are getting the shit kicked out of them, and then he's just like, we have the power to destroy the stone, and she's like, don't, because she just does not want to do it. And then it's just
and then what does he say? Oh, there's a line in
you.
Yeah, that one. But I also love when he's like, I know he says something about along the lines of like, I know it's I forget what he says, but he's like, it has to be you.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
You, but
it is.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my god.
Because, like he said earlier in Infinity War, like, he literally, pretty immediately, it was like, okay, we got to destroy the stone. Like, he was just noble. It's like, okay, this is what's got to be done. You got to take me out. And he was just like, her energy source that was similar to his, that was the only way to do it. So it was on her.
Oh my god, I know, it's so fucking sad. And then, of course, she does all that for basically nothing, like, just to hurt herself.
Basically nothing.
Yeah.
But I mean, she does it. Like, she technically does win, but she knew nothing about the time stone that he could, like, reverse it.
I know, what an asshole. And then he does it, and he does it right in front of her, and it's just, it's so awful. And the way that he does it, it seems so painful and just sad the way
when
he does it.
When he rips out the stone. Oh, yeah, we didn't mention, and again, that moment in WandaVision where she sees him like that again, that was a fucking scene.
Oh my god, that freaked me out. Again, talking about the eerie and creepy stuff of WandaVision. It was only for a split second, and I feel like if I would have blinked, I would have missed it. But like you and I were, I think I was even saying something to you at the time. I forget. I was like, and then I was like, I actually like outwardly
I had the same
gasped.
reaction. Yeah, no, definitely.
Because it just, first of all, it's eerie looking anyway, just the way, because he's dead and his head's all smushed in, but it's also like thinking of her emotions. I mean, the first split second you see it, I feel like you're just shocked, but then like you start to like realize like, oh shit, is she like being haunted by that was such a good
scene right there too. Like after she kind of snaps herself back out of it and sees him as he is in her bubble or her hex. That scene's so sad too. He's literally like, we don't have to stay here. We can go wherever we want. And she's no, we can't. This is our home now, because she knows he can't leave. And that's something he realizes later, but she knows at that point, we can't leave because you're not alive outside of this hex.
And that's so sad to think about in the context of like their relationship or any relationship. It's like you want to be able to go and do things with the person you love. Like, oh, let's go here, let's travel, let's do this or whatever. And they can't. They literally are just confined to that like space, and that's like, oh, that's shitty and depressing. But it's the only way that he can exist. So it's like, it's so sad. It's so I don't know. I think one thing that really draws me to their relationship is like, first of all, they're just like, they have such adorable, funny moments, obviously, like the paprika thing, and just like just little moments that were even in the movies, but like even in WandaVision, of course, all the sitcom stuff, it gets to show their goofy side of them as a couple, and it's so cute. And like, but I also love, I think I said this to you, and I think you've said it too, that you agree, like one of my favorite scenes in WandaVision, because it's so intense, is when he actually like confronts her about everything, and he actually just like yells at her.
Yeah, I did want to mention that too.
Because like, and I love how she says, you've never spoken to me this way, or you've never talked to me this way before, and he's just like, but he's
that whole fucking scene is so great, because that was right after earlier in the episode where he kind of releases Norm, his coworker, And then he's freaking out, and he's like, "Where's my phone? Where's my phone? My sister is taking care of our father. He's sick," because he's just stuck in that. And then later, in the episode, I remember you saying like, "Ooh, is he going to confront Wanda?"
Yeah,
And then he does.
Yeah.
And then and when they start having that fight.
Oh my god! And if there's ever a scene where somebody's worthy for a fucking Emmy nomination, Paul Bettany does so good in that scene. His yelling and the way that he's so intense, but then he ends up.
Yeah. I love when they fucking they both raise up to each other when they like kind of come off the ground a few feet.
I know, I love that. That's their type of arguments. but
I agree with that too, because he has lines in that scene that I always loved when he's just like, he said something like, he doesn't remember, or he doesn't, what's outside of Westview, and she's just like, you don't want to know, believe me, or whatever. And then he's just like, he screams at her and he says, you don't get to make that choice for me.
I know, and he's so good.
And then she's like, you've never spoken to me like that before, like you said. But then the line when he's just, after that, he's like, before what? I don't remember what's before any of this. I can't remember my life before Westview. I don't know who I am. And he's like, I'm scared.
I'm scared, yeah. So I was actually, I've been nerding out for this shit. Look what you've turned me into, Dylan. So last night, it's so funny.
I love it.
So last night I actually found that scene on YouTube because I just wanted to watch it again. And I was reading some of the comments, and almost everybody was like, the acting in this is so great, but especially between the two of them, they're such great actors, the chemistry. And so many people were like, Paul Bettany has this ability in that scene to go from obviously like angry and there were some people who were like, yo, when Vision raises his voice, that's kind of scary. You don't know what because he's always so calm and sweet and stuff. So to see him do that, it was like, whoa. But then a lot of people were saying too, like, Paul Bettany's acting is so good. He goes from being obviously angry and raising his voice to a height that we've never heard it before as Vision, and then like to immediately being like, I'm scared, and then he just looks more vulnerable. Like at that moment when he admits that he's scared, then it's almost like the anger kind of melts away to a certain degree, and he's left with like this vulnerable. And I'm like, dude, that is good acting when you can portray that, especially with all the makeup and everything that he has to wear and everything that he's got to, the way that he looks but he's able to express those emotions still through his like facial expressions. I'm like, oh my god, that is so awesome.
And then from that point in the series, like storyline going forward is just like he lies to Wanda about like with the Halloween, like he couldn't spend Halloween with them because he's just suspicious of her, and then it goes to the nobility of the character. Like he literally steps out of Westview because he wants to help the people.
He's like the people are trapped.
He doesn't understand what Wanda's doing, and at that point she doesn't either, but he doesn't necessarily believe that. And then he's literally falling to his knees, like being torn apart because he's outside the hex.
Dude, if there's several scenes in this show that make me tear up and cry, and I did, especially towards the end. But like that was one of the first ones, like when he's coming out and he's just starting to break. Because like again, I didn't know what was gonna happen, and I thought, oh my god, is he gonna fucking just die all over again?
I love that whole fucking scene. Is the cut back and forth between him outside the hex, and then that was right when Billy got like first showed his powers. So basically, Tommy has powers like Quicksilver. He's fast, and Billy has magic like Wanda. And he's like, Billy's hearing Vision outside the hex, and then he runs to Wanda, and he's like, he can sense it, and she's like, I need you to focus. And he's like, they think he's dying or whatever. The whole back and forth between Billy and Wanda and Vision outside the hex, I fucking love that scene.
Oh,
it's
me
so
too.
Fucking good.
It's very intense.
There's a lot of urgency to it.
Yeah. And I felt so like sad when he started to go out of it, and then he was breaking apart, and then but like I love again the character of Vision is so noble and just so, again, I can't even think of the right word for him, but he's just so selfless is a good word, I guess. He's very like he puts a lot of people before himself, like including Wanda, but like people even of the world or whatever. And he like when he comes out of and he's like, please, the people in here need help or whatever he says, like I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sad, like ugh. I really thought like we weren't gonna. I knew it's WandaVision. I mean, I knew he wasn't gonna straight up just die there, but I was like, man, he literally can't live outside of this thing. So it's like, is it outside of the hex? So I'm like,
and then I love the moment too where when at the end of that where she realizes what's happening outside the hex, and she also is just like, he can't fucking die out there. I can't have that happen.
Oh my god,
she literally like freezes the hex to expand it just to get him back inside.
Oh my god, I know. It's like their love is so. I'm such a hopeless romantic bitch anyway. Like I love romance if it's done well in a lot of the entertainment that I like. I even fucking create romance where there is no romance in the stuff that I like.
Mhm.
So, but like to have like their relationship is just so strong, and they do just complement each other so well. And him, doesn't he also have a line? I don't remember how it goes exactly, which I'm sure you do, but where he was like, he basically said something along the lines of like, I've never really experienced grief because I've never had anybody to lose, or like, what is that line?
Oh yeah, that was in the episode 8 when they're in the flashback and they're in the Avengers compound, and that's after she just lost Pietro, and he was like, I don't really understand loss because I've always been alone. Like he said, I don't
Oh, yeah.
understand the lack. Like he doesn't understand not being alone. Like he doesn't understand people because
Yeah.
he's always been alone.
Oh, and then she helps him to understand. Well, and then I guess if like, because we are talking about their relationship, and I guess to kind of sort of wrap up or get towards the end, like I guess we could talk about like, unless you have anything else to talk about before that. Well, like I guess should we talk a little bit about like White Vision, because we haven't really said that much about him, and I don't know if there is too much to say, but I guess.
I think that was just. Honestly, I don't have much to say about White Vision. I think that was just a way for them to, give Vision some action sequence at the end. White Vision is from the comics.
Oh
And
shit, really?
It is in a similar. WandaVision is loosely like there's different elements from different comics pulled for WandaVision.
Okay.
And White Vision is from the comics, and he comes out of like a period where, Vision's mind is wiped or something, and his body's also torn apart like it is in WandaVision, and then he becomes White Vision, and he doesn't remember Wanda or any of their marriage or anything. So he is from the comics, but yeah, I don't have a lot to say about him other than, again, Paul Bettany, like I told you, his cheeky fucking teasing of the fans. He was just like, oh, and there's an actor I always wanted to work with, and I can't wait for people to see it, and then he was talking about himself.
Well, I know that's so funny. I think it was a good way though too to like give the vision that's not White Vision, that's the actual Vision.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
which one is the actual Vision? I remember thinking that. But like to
Oh,
give
yeah.
Vision his memories back, like so that he does kind of,
Yeah, so
because that
they
makes the
left the
ending
door
scene more
open, like
impactful.
and
Yeah.
you don't see White Vision after he leaves,
Mhm.
so they're leaving the door open to
I
maybe
wonder
like,
what's gonna happen with that. Yeah.
yeah.
But I also, and a lot of people, I've seen people say this, so I just want to say this while we're on White Vision, then we can totally get to like the end sequence, because oh my god, that's heartbreaking. But how like Vision literally fights White Vision with like with like
With
how smart, with logic,
philosophical, like
yeah,
it's talking about the ship of Theseus or something,
yeah.
where it's like I don't even remember the whole thing, but it's just like it's a
That's like
perfect
a
Vision
very Vision.
way. That's a
Yes,
Vision fight, just
I love that.
dialogue, just talking. They're talking about like, a ship, and like
Yeah,
if the rotted boards are removed and replaced, is it the same
You-
ship? And
yeah,
is the rot the memory? It makes sense.
yeah.
And they're like, is like basically they were just saying like which one of us is the true Vision? Is either of us the true Vision, or are both of us the true Vision?
Yeah, that was interesting. I do, yeah. And then it actually made White Vision be like, oh shit, wait, and then he just like fucked off or whatever. But um,
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah. So if we wanted to just wrap up, I guess like, and again, it's a good way to end it, is the ending scene between Vision and Wanda is so
Yeah.
sad.
Mhm.
But
Well,
it's
it starts definitely. I want to start with it, that is basically the beginning of the scene, but like after Wanda kind of tricks Agatha and she
oh
like
yeah,
casts those runes, and then Agatha can't use her magic, and that's like a big moment where she accepts that she's the Scarlet Witch.
oh yeah, I love that.
I even saw a tweet very recently in the past day or so where somebody put a parallel between that scene where she's talking to Agatha about like only the witch who uses, because she just learned really fast, I guess, from Agatha,
Mm.
to an earlier scene in that episode where she's like, I'm not a witch, I don't cast spells, no one taught me magic. And then it's important to mention too, as a Marvel fan, when Agatha was like, your power, and I remember this line verbatim, your power exceeds that of the Sorcerer Supreme. And I was like, Brandi, who's the Sorcerer Supreme?
And I was like, I don't know. Yeah.
You've seen
Well,
Doctor Strange in the Avengers movies, but not his own movie. But just
yeah.
that's a big deal because, again, they both are practicing magic. She doesn't really know it until now. And just the fact her power, especially in the comics, is fucking almost unmatched. So That was
that's
just such a
awesome.
big moment, the name drop of the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh,
But
that would have been
anyways,
cool if they did put him in the
that
show.
would have been, yeah.
I guess for whatever reason they were like, nah, let's have it. I mean, I guess it's better it focuses directly on Wanda, like that, which is it's
Yeah,
her thing. But it's like, that would have been cool.
yeah. But no, yeah, as far as after all that, the scene kind of starts where it's just such a sad line where I know you'll make this right, and she says yes, but not for us.
Oh yeah,
And then
that's
they
so
just kind of
sad.
walk home with the boys, and then they put the boys to bed.
It's like they
Not
want
even
their one last moment.
they
Yeah,
want their one last moment, and they want just the boys to be asleep when they disappear. Like they didn't
yeah,
tell them anything. Like obviously Vision knows what's gonna happen.
yeah,
Wanda
yeah,
knows what's gonna happen because she's, you know, pulling the hex in
yeah.
to let everyone go. And then there's just a sad line where she's just like, she was just talking to the boys and she's like, thank you for choosing me to be your mom. And then, the hex comes in, they fall asleep, and I guess they disappeared and went somewhere else. But then, yeah, that's when they go downstairs, Wanda and Vision, and that whole scene is just, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's like it's sad, but it's also written so beautifully, and it gives you it's kind of hopeful because of that very ending thing that they say to each other, like, oh, we've been torn apart before, so it stands to reason we'll see each other again. However they say it,
He
I don't
said,
remember. But
we said goodbye before,
yeah,
so it
said
stands to
goodbye.
reason. And then Wanda, like, grabs his face. We'll say hello again.
I know, it's so
But that
sad.
whole scene is written so well. Like, I love the way, she turns off the lights and then
Oh
he
yeah.
turns it back on, and, and then they start talking, and then he just, when the hex starts coming in, there's a certain camera movement of the hex, like, turning the street corner,
Hmm.
heading towards the house that I always fucking love. Like, it's so sad that it's just impending. Like, they can't
Yeah.
avoid it. It's coming right for them.
So they only have a few moments to say bye, yeah, which sucks.
Yeah, but I love his, they see the hex coming, and he's just like, I feel I must know, what am I? And then her whole fucking speech about, again, verbatim, I could say it verbatim, right? She's like, you, Vision, are the piece of the Mind Stone that lives within me. You're my
Yeah.
sadness, you're my hope, but mostly you're my love.
I know, I love that. That is so. Ugh. And oh well, I guess. Ugh, I mean, I know we definitely need to wrap up, but we should have talked a little bit about the scene too, where she goes back and she, to get his body, even though she doesn't end up taking it, because that
Oh
was so
yeah,
sad.
that was
Yeah,
sad too, and that was a callback to, when I just feel you. She like
yeah.
felt him, and then,
She's like, I
I can't
can't.
feel you.
I know, that's so sad.
Hayward was a fucking dick in that scene, like literally prodding her,
Yeah.
and he fucking got her when he was just like, you know, he was like, you know, I can't just let you take $3 billion worth of vibranium just to put it in the ground. That's all he was to him.
Wow, that's shitty. I
And then
know.
he just triggers her by saying like, he's not yours or something.
Yeah, that's so
And
fucked up.
then that's when she goes to the house and she has the deed with the heart, and that's when she kind of breaks down, and that's when it all starts.
Well, with that being said, too, I do love how the whole thing. We've already established that the whole thing is about her grief, obviously, and her grief extends to her childhood, to losing her brother, to losing Vision. So there's three different bullet points there that are like, oh, this is
Hmm.
why she is the way that she is. But I really, really, really do love in this, especially because it's WandaVision, it's both of them,
Yeah.
that her main motivation in this to wanting to just do what she's doing is because she just wants to keep him in her life, no matter what, well, not no matter what, because she didn't really know she was hurting other people in the process, but like at least
Yeah.
not fully, she wasn't aware of it, but like she just wanted to be with him so bad that like she was willing to go along in this weird quirky world of these sick, like just to have that family, to have that comfort, to have somebody with her. And that is the fucking reason why I love this show so much. I mean, I've already said I love it there's so many reasons, the sitcom thing, the grief and being able to relate to her on so many levels with that, but like the whole like just also just like being like in love and losing that person, like that's just wow. And it's just like that was the last person
Yeah.
that, like, the whole like them being in love even aside, it's like that was like her last chance for like hope and love and just like finding it in him. And it's like that's just what she wants to salvage, that little bit of like,
Yeah.
I just love it. So that's just so powerful to me, especially because that's her motivation is just wanting to be with him, and
Yeah.
especially once they have their kid, or the kids too. It's like, of course, she wants her family, but it's like,
Yeah.
I just love that's the thing in this. It's like, it's such a simple story, especially in 2021, to have a story that's basically, when you strip away, again, there's a lot of complexity in it.
Yeah, if
but,
you strip it away, it's a very simple
Yeah.
story about her grief, but
Mhm.
just funny for you to call it simple.
Which
the
it's not, I
confusion
know.
and the sitcoms and the
But like
But yeah, no, I know what you mean.
motivations and her whole
The
reasoning for
core
doing
of
it
the
is,
series is
yeah,
very simple.
which is what I love. I just love the simplicity, and she's just grieving. She's alone. She's at what does she say? She says a really good thing too about like when she's talking to, I guess, her fake brother or whatever on
Pietro.
in the Halloween episode. Doesn't she say something like, I just remember feeling.
Yeah, he was trying to ask. He was like, "How
Yeah.
did you do all this?" And she
Yeah.
was just like, "I don't remember how this happened. I just remember feeling completely alone, just empty.
Yeah.
Nothing, endless nothingness."
Yeah, that's so sad and dark and like fucked up. So it's like,
And you even said, like, I remember you pointed this out to her. Elizabeth Olsen's acting when she went to get Vision's body, or presumably, and she didn't even want to say it. She was just like, when I came back, his
oh yeah,
body,
she said,
she paused. She didn't even
says
want to
she's
say
about
that.
to say, yeah, it looks like her mouth is about to say, because like you can tell she's about to say something with a B, and then she stops, but then she makes herself say it. It's like, oh, that got me, because that's just like real. That's like she doesn't even want to bring herself to say, oh, just his body. Like, oh, it's so sad, but
Really
that's
is.
what I love about it. It's just so like.
Well, I know. I mean, well, I guess just to wrap up, I just want to say for the millionth time, I am so fucking happy that something like Wanda, for me specifically Wanda, but Vision is an extension of her story, but for
Yeah.
you, because you love romance so much, that Wanda and Vision, you were watching fucking videos on it, and it's just like a brand new
I
thing
know,
to
I'm
you,
such
and
a
it's just
nerd.
like, I love it.
Well, I
I
should
love it.
also say the romance and the grief thing are the two biggest things that really bring
Yeah.
me into Wanda's story, but I do have to just say, to be shallow for a moment, I'm a fucking Paul Bettany fangirl. I've always thought he was attractive. I've always liked him so, and his portrayal of Vision is just so good. And not to take anything away from his acting, just be like, oh, he's just attractive, because obviously he's an amazing actor and he plays Vision like I can't even imagine anybody else in the role. Like he's so good. But I mean, hey, attraction to both characters might have something to do with it. They're both hot, so whatever.
Hey, I love Wanda, but I also fucking think Elizabeth Olsen. I told you in that last scene when she gets her Scarlet Witch costume, I remember saying, like, isn't she fucking hot in that costume?
Yeah, I know, and I love when she wears like the crown thing that looks like
The
she looks
crown,
dope in
yeah.
that. Yeah, she's just so that might help a little bit too. But no, but I don't know. And yeah, definitely the romance thing, and being such a Paul Bettany fan. I already was anyway. I'd only really seen a couple of his movies because I love Jennifer Connelly so much, but like I'd seen some of his stuff, and I just always liked him, and he's always had like this, like, I don't know, his voice is very alluring, and like, I don't know, he's awesome. But like, so it initially started out with like, oh, okay, because I remember when I very first saw Vision, and this was when we were watching, what's the movie where he got no shit, but like the one where he first comes out as
Age of
Vision.
Ultron.
Yeah, and I remember like being like, oh, and then he said something, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's Paul Bettany, damn, like that voice and just everything. Oh my god. So there's
I love that you can fangirl over Paul Bettany as much as I can fanboy over Elizabeth Olsen.
There we go. That's what I love
it.
it. I mean, there's definitely more layers to it than that, but obviously that helps.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's there too.
Well, we just talked for 2 hours, so I would hope there'd be more layers to it than just that.
Oh,
but
there
yeah,
definitely are.
I had to add that at the end. That he's gorgeous. Anyway.
Yes. Well, there's a couple things we did not mention. I don't want to get into them. I just want to quickly mention them because they're a big thing. Agatha all along when it's revealed that Agatha's the theme song, and then that became such a thing. I told you that became like bigger than Justin Bieber and a bunch of things on like the Billboard charts or some shit. Like it became huge.
Yeah, I realized how big it was last night when I was watching videos and stuff, and I would go through comments just to see what people would say, and there were a couple interviews I watched with Catherine Hahn or whatever, and other castmates or whatever, and then like people in the comments were like, can't believe there was not one mention of Agatha all along and how much of a bop that was. So people, and I remember it being really catchy when I had heard it. I'm like, oh, this is cute, and I didn't think it blew up the way it did, but that's awesome.
Yeah, and then we didn't mention, I love episode 7, we didn't mention much of that. That's when Wanda's like depressed, but the intro, Brandi, The Office.
Oh, yeah, I know. We didn't talk much about The Office stuff. I think I referenced it once in the beginning, but yes, there's just little tiny Office references even later on. But yeah, the intro obviously is a nod to the Office theme, which is so fucking awesome.
Yeah. And the other stuff is like Vision looking at the camera like Jim. I love when he just gets up out of his chair and he's like, what am I sitting here doing? Talking to you.
Yeah.
I gotta go find. And then he just gets out of his chair and bumps into the boom mic.
Yeah, loved it. Oh, it was great. Because, like, weren't him and Darcy, like, stuck at a light?
They're stuck in a light, but somehow he's doing the confessional at the same time. Because he walks away from the chair, bumps into the boom mic, and then flies out of the car, so he must have been doing it somehow at the same time.
Oh my God, I swear to God, maybe it's also just, again, my love for Paul Bettany, but he just plays Vision in such a charming, like, just lovable way. Like, there's nobody on earth that probably ever watched anything that he's in and been like, oh, I just don't like that character. Like, he's like just so lovable. Like, it's great.
Well, to end it on Paul Bettany, and I have this at the end of my notes, Brandi, this will be the last thing you gotta tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Snitches end up in.
Oh, okay, hold on. You gotta say it to me again, because now I'm laughing.
Snitches end up in.
Ditches.
Come on, Brandi.
Come on. Oh, he's the best.
Yeah. And so is she.
I know.
I fucking love that we did this. I fucking love we did a podcast on it. I'm happy.
Yep, now I'm going to go rewatch the whole thing. Now that we talked about it, now I want to watch it all again. If it was a weekend, maybe I would start watching it again.
Snitches end up in ditches. Lizzie, come on.